pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All members are present except for Greg.
Yes.
And there are no minutes. Is there any public comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone. The last time I appeared in front of this board was in October of 2014. And I think we all remember that meeting. Certainly it's been viewed several times on the World Wide Web. I'm here tonight to say this, and I was hoping to be here last week, which would have been the first meeting following the referendum on the police vote. But unfortunately I was ill and couldn't make it. So I'm here tonight to say the same thing I was going to say 2 weeks ago, which is, if at that meeting on October 21st, 2014, I said or did anything that personally or professionally offended anybody on this volunteer board, I sincerely apologize. That was not my intent at all. What you witnessed that evening was my passion. I have a tremendous amount of passion for my position as police chief, a tremendous amount of passion to make sure that we have the proper equipment, personnel, and professional development ready to meet any emergency need, anyone's need during their time of need. But most of all, what you saw was my passion for my personnel and their safety. And I take that very seriously. Many of you don't know that we have a biannual award ceremony where I stand up and I actually address the families of all of our personnel. And I look each and every spouse or significant other and children in the eye, and I tell them that it is my responsibility on my shoulders to make sure that their loved ones come home safely at the end of their tour of duty. So when we're talking about a piece of equipment, we're talking about a project that someone's been dedicated for 2 years, that's what you saw was my passion. What I'm hoping to do tonight, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, is I'd certainly like to go around, shake hands, put this issue behind us. We certainly have a lot of important work that all of us need to do on behalf of the town of Old Saybrook, which certainly starts tonight with reviewing the police department's budget. But again, if I did offend anybody, totally not my intent whatsoever. But if I did, I apologize. I've spoken to some of you personally about that, but wanted to address you all publicly. So, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, if I could just go around and...
Which hand are you going to shake?
I'm going to shake with my right hand. I'm driving with my right hand, shaking with my right. So, Chairman. We'll talk about that. Sorry.
I'm reluctantly shaking.
You're reluctantly shaking.
That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll just give you a wave.
Oh, good.
Any other public comment?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, Co-Chair, Board of Finance. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Salvatore Villa, 36 Cricket Court. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm here to publicly support our police and fire departments. I think they do a wonderful job in town, as well as all of you who have very hard decisions. I've worked in municipalities. Carl knows my history. You do not have an easy job. I know each and every one of you support each department in your own way, and I think that's wonderful, and you support the town by what you're doing. What I'm asking you to do is support them both with the finances. I know you have tough decisions, things to do, but please give the men and women of our police and fire department what they need so that they can protect us when things go wrong. I greatly appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes, sir.
Green, Irish. I'm probably only the only real Irishman in the place. I was born there. Good evening, or as Irish speakers would say, Dia Bacarda. I apologize that I have to use notes, but as an old man with my bulletproof vest on and my hearing aid firmly turned up, my memory sometimes fails me. On the 10th of February the town was sent a very clear and then unequivocal message to the taxpayers. We have too much policing. I have nothing against police people. We just have too much. And our police department costs reflect that. They are a never increasing percentage of our total taxes, and this year they are in again for the largest increase of any department by percentage. Problem is, we already have too much, even without any increases. You, the town management, and specifically the Board of Finance, need to listen to the taxpayers because you were elected to represent them. I will certainly agree that the shrinking of the department by reducing the headcount is not easy to do. There are problems. But something must be done. Looking at the proposed 2015-2016 budget, not from the various percentage increases over last year by item, but from a bottom-up look, a number of figures jump out that grab your attention. Backfill overtime, 80,000 a year. Overtime not backfill, 31,000 a year. Extra overtime, 57,000 a year. Personal development time, 47,000 a year. Sick injury overtime, 30,000 a year. We've got to 245,000 in overtime just in those few items. And to go on, special assignment time, 21,000. Now, I'm not quite sure whether that's included in the ones above. I don't think so, but it's not clear from the budget whether it is or not. Increase in clerical staff, 70,000 a year. 78,000 a year. Not to mention a total of 28,500 for the maintenance and feeding of 2 police dogs, if you start adding up the bits from the different parts of the budget. The cost of running our emergency communications. Next year, staff costs alone, 453,000. I can see no reason not to regionalize the whole thing and eliminate a large part of that cost. Finally, can someone tell me why we allocate $1,000 a year to feed the prisoners, but we want $10,000 to buy a second fingerprint machine for the exclusive use of the prisoners? I mean, what are we planning in the police station? I would suggest that to avoid the difficulty of layoffs, you should cut the overtime by a minimum of $200,000. Now, I know that that will leave gaps because they can't be filled in, but we already accept, and everybody in this town will tell you, we have too much policing. So this would be a way to reduce it a little without basically hurting people's employment chances. And seriously investigate the regionalization of communications. It might just avoid the town rejecting your next budget. If you guys have an irresistible compunction to spend money, then take the funds you saved and put it into something that's much more needed in this town, like, for instance, snow plowing and mending the roads, which are in a dreadful state and which you aren't even keeping up with, and you haven't done in the last few years. You could use it for that, and the people of Old Saybrook, I think, might appreciate it. But the one thing I'm asking you to do is to stand back and not just talk about 3% here and 2% there and 1% there. Stand back and say, do we really need all this? Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Agus go raibh míle maith agaibh. Irish for something.
Oh,
I just said, thank you very much.
yeah.
Other public comment? Old Saybrook Fire Department. Chief,
Good evening.
how are you?
For those of you who do not know who I am, my name is Jay Rankin. I've been with the fire department for over 20 years. I've been in town for all those years, like 27. I have been a chief officer for the department going on 8 years at this time, and I just took over for JT. He has done his 5-year tenure that he's allowed to do regarding our bylaws. So I'm here to answer, I'm here to answer some questions regarding the budget. Our budget has been submitted. It's 1.3% under what it was last year. Pretty much nothing, everything was status quo. Everything's running just as smooth as it could be. We just took delivery on the new truck. We're hoping to put that in service within the next month or so. But right now I'm summoned there, and I have spoken with Carl about the budget. He supports our budget. I know for a fact in the past 7 to 8 years we've been financially responsible regarding the fire department budget. I mean, we've always been at a minimal increase, and for some reason this year, due to the airflow testing, we're under a little bit, so we're 1.3% below. So I'm here to entertain any questions that anybody from the Board of Finance has.
Just very quickly on their budget, I want to add on to what Jay is saying. Their operating budget is minuscule. I mean, as far as having a fire department, you can see it's just over $250,000, $274,000. The cost of our fire department is in our sinking funds and our capital outlays, and to keep these guys, when they go out on their calls, on the best, well, Dave's one of them, in the best equipment. We have a very modest firehouse, keep the firehouse safe with the exhaust fans, like you were saying. And when we 3-4 years ago, the sinking fund, as you guys know, was, I've been told it was at 0, but we have it at a point right now where we're going to level fund it. And what that's allowed us to do is buy a new truck, and a year from now it'll be paid off. And we'll be saving for any future capital needs. And I don't intend to, we're not going to have any dramatic spikes in the sinking fund. There was a little increase in the yearly capital account this year, and that's what Jay referred to. But their operating budget itself, as you can see, is pretty minimal. JT, a year ago, an engine blew in one of the trucks, and they were actually able to absorb it within their operating budget that year because something else was down a lot and they didn't have to spend it. So JT was actually able to work it into that budget. But year over year, I mean, we can say it 100 times. I mean, to have as active a volunteer fire department as we do, and to between the yearly capital budget, the operating budget, and the capital sinking fund, I think it's pretty well run, sufficiently budgeted, but not overly budgeted department. But that's my 2 cents in working with JT over the last 4 years. Now Jay. And that's just my 2 cents on the budget.
So we fund that on the capital side at $35,000 a year?
I think this year, I'm not at it, but it's, no? What's, I'm sorry, what page you on, Brett?
I was looking for capital expenditures at $35,000.
That would be for,
16, 17.
yeah, for year over year, yeah.
And then the capital outlay.
The sinking fund is at 155 is what I put in this year, 155,000.
And that's to cover what?
That is to cover large purchases that we're planning for, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Well,
up
it'll
to
actually go for the new fire truck.
Yeah, but,
Right.
yeah, no, right.
Every time we need to buy an apparatus, we need to
This
keep that
July
sinking fund
1st,
funded.
we funded that, we bought the new fire truck, borrowing against the undesignated sinking fund. So we're paying ourselves back on that. So this July 1, $150,000 will go back into the undesignated sinking fund, right, Bob? I mean,
Fund
and
balance.
fund balance.
It's on camera, I want to make sure you get
And undesignated sinking fund, that's what I've called it for years and years. And then on July 1, 16, that truck will be paid for and will actually be in the positive, saving for the next large purchase. Actually, JT and this year Jay have laid out a 20-year, and I think you guys have it in your book.
It's in there.
About 10 more years.
Yeah, about 10 more years of purchases.
The next truck that was due to be purchased is 2020, believe it or not. It's engine 3, but we just had that refurbished a few years back. That's the one we just blew the motor in last winter, and we were able to absorb it in our budget, and we had a cut here and there on other projects that we wanted to do, but we were able to get the $30,000 out of our budget. We replaced it with a brand new motor, so we're going to hopefully push that truck off 2 or 3 years to make a new purchase, so it's going to help the town out.
The idea is to level fund the sinking fund so that we're not looking at this. I need another 100,000, or they need another 200,000. We're level funding the sinking fund, that's where it is, that's where I'd like to keep it. The capital fund is 35,000 a year, as you said, that's for what they need to do year over year in the fire department, and then you have their operating budget. So that's the cost of the fire department yearly, is 180, about 155 plus the 35 plus the 274. That's your cost of the fire department.
Other questions for the chief?
I have a question. What happens to the old truck which is just replaced with a new one?
It'll go out to like a bidding process. Other towns will bid on it. A lot of times that truck will not meet the NFPA standards in our area.
Right.
But like in Iowa, I mean, these hurricane ravaged or tornado ravaged areas, or some small town up in Maine, or we'll buy the truck. I mean, we'll put it out to bid, and the highest bidder will get it. But we're hoping to get a minimum of 7 up to 12,000. We're hoping we're going to get for that truck.
Right, JT had estimated a max of 20.
Yeah, max.
Yeah, right.
It's an old truck. It's an 1982. It's seen its day. It did not pass its pump test this past year, so it's met its term. So.
Carl, does this fire truck fall under the town policy about property, the disposal of town property?
It's a town piece of property,
It's
yes.
probably depreciated to 0, but.
Right.
Yeah, right, it does.
So the finance director and you are both aware of how the equipment is disposed of?
We will be aware of how it's disposed of, yes, absolutely.
In conjunction with the fire chief or the fire department?
I'm sorry?
In conjunction with the fire department?
Yeah, oh yeah. Jay mentioned a very important thing, the NFPA standards. Dave, you know this too. You have a truck, you gotta have so many guys on the truck, it's gotta have certain equipment, and they're expensive apparatus. I did see the new truck, it's quite nice, and there's a dedication to David Heine on the truck. Yeah, real nice. Becky will have that in the paper, I think, this week, so.
Chief, who's the fire department liaison to the Board of Finance?
It's 2 of us, myself and Joe Johnson, who's the deputy chief. We oversee the budget and report to the town.
Okay. I know, aren't you the liaison from the Board of Finance to the fire department? Yeah. Okay. And could you briefly summarize how the fueling of the vehicles occur and what the accountability on that?
Sure. Every vehicle that is in our fleet has a plastic special key that slides into pump, turns, records which vehicle it is. So every time you go to fill up, that key ring that's coming off that truck goes into the pump, turns on, and if it's my chief's truck or the deputy chief's truck or engine 1, whatever it may be, he makes a recording. Larry has a recording at the town garage of how much each apparatus is taken for fuel when it is fueled up. And then Georgina gives us a report every month of how much fuel we're going through each month. So we keep an eye on it throughout the year.
Now, on the fire trucks themselves, including the smaller, the brush truck and stuff, do you record the use by hours or by mileage for the use of the vehicle?
It's by gallons.
No, but I mean when you're normally doing maintenance on the truck.
Oh, that's all done by mileage.
By mileage.
Eric's is hired by us to do the annual maintenance on all vehicles each year, and it's all done by mileage.
Okay. So, and do any of the trucks have hour meters on them? Or?
The pumps have hour meters,
Okay.
not the truck itself.
And did you get the email I sent you? It was a little bit later.
I did.
Okay. Do you want to comment about an invitation to any of the Board of Finance members?
Sure.
To come over and see
Tommy sent me a email today. I guess he had to tour from JT a couple years back, when you first got on,
About 3 years ago.
and took him to the fire department and showed him the operations and all the equipment and how it operated. That's an open invitation to anybody. That's open invitation to anybody in the town. If you have a question, you want to come down on a Saturday morning, I'll take you through all the equipment, I'll take you through all our training records and anything you want to see, all the equipment that's involved with the fire department. We'd be more than happy to give you the grand tour. So it's an open invitation to everybody.
When you do mutual aid, you do that back and forth and it's all
Yes.
free? Like you
It
had
is.
that fire in Outer Cove last week?
Valley Shore has had a mutual aid pack for years. I'm going back when the firehouse was back here beyond the backyard. It's just been a mutual pack for going back to the 1800s. Each town has always helped each other out. One hand washes the other hand. You know, it's just, the other night we had the fire up in Outer Cove. We called, Essex was on an automatic call for that because there's no hydrants up there. So they were immediately sent in with an engine, with a crew, and their tanker with 1,800 gallons of water. And they're the ones that really saved our butt in the beginning because we had to cut a hole in the ice, set up a draft. By the time that's all done, our first truck was running out of water. Essex had just pulled up with their tanker and they gave us another 1,800 gallons of water to keep us going. So at a total, I think it was no more than a minute we lost water for a little bit until we got the prime, until we got the pump from the pond. So it worked out well.
Remarkable.
I'm sorry?
You knocked that down. Remarkable.
It did. When we got there, the left side of the house had fallen into the basement. It was already done. It was the new addition. You could tell that it burned faster than the rest of the house did. That's just because of the new composites and the new materials that are used these days. And we concentrated on saving the right side of the house, and that's the way it ended up. So.
Other than new engines, is there any other big capital expenses coming up in a few years?
The only one we talked about is the exhaust fans coming up. We're going to have to face that exhaust system in the firehouse. We don't have an exhaust system. So when the trucks fire up, the exhaust pipes are on anywhere from 6 to 8 inches, and they just blow out that black smoke. And it's just sending soot throughout the whole building. It's going into the office buildings, getting in the air conditioning units. OSHA is going to show up someday and say, "You're done. We got to put the system in." But it's in the capital to have that replaced.
Over 2 years.
Yes.
So,
We're going to split it.
yeah,
What's the cost of that, Jay, by the way?
about 20.
Joe, what was that?
Like 180,000.
Yeah, it was pretty expensive. 130, wasn't it?
Yeah, just about.
It's expensive.
When's that, the Cascade?
That's due to be replaced in 2019.
This year or next year.
Yep.
Any other questions for Chief Franklin?
Thank you.
Thanks.
You know, quick comment. And I've said this in conversation to a lot of people. We're lucky to have a volunteer fire department and a very healthy volunteer fire department. The police in this town are first responders. You know, go to a town with a paid fire department and watch them go all over town all day to fender benders. And it'll with gigantic trucks. It'll make you crazy. And that, you know, or medicals, and that's what, you know, largely what the police do in this town. I know the fire department goes to a lot of those events, but and the chief can even the chief of police can also tell us that's a lot of the calls is medicals, and a lot of times the fire department, Sal in Middletown, I mean the fire department is going to a lot of those calls, or all of them.
We run 12,000 runs a year. So we run.
Just to touch on that, Tom, just so you understand, you asked about mutual aid. The towns around us use their fire departments as first responders, but they burn their men out. They're not there's times that 2 neighboring towns are not even getting a truck out the door. I know for a fact three times last year, was right after we had the meeting last year, we went to Flat Rock Place, the mall over Westbrook, to cover their automatic alarm because they couldn't get a fire truck on the road. So they called Saybrook, said, "Can you come over and handle this automatic alarm?" And we did. And just today, when I worked the day shift for the police department, we had 7 medicals before 3 o'clock. So you imagine the fire department running to 7 medicals with the fire trucks and the expense that would be. It would burn our guys out, and the fire department would be in the same position that all the other towns are in right now. Lack of interest because they get burned out with all these medical calls. So it works out well for this town. I think it's a great system, and I really don't think we should tamper with it.
Yeah.
Do you want to just mention how many volunteers there are in the fire department?
We have, right now, we're 98 right now, we have in the fire department. So we're lucky, at a basic automatic alarm during the day, we're getting 15 guys that show up. We get 3 trucks on the road. So it works out well for us. Thank you.
All right. Finance Director report.
Hi, I have good news. I heard from OPM yesterday that we were successful in getting the grant for, the new accounting system and the uniform chart of accounts. So I did, pass out last meeting, the proposal from Bloom Shapiro and asked the board to take a look at that and consider. So now we will have, the estimate in that is,
19 to 21.
right, 19 to 21,000, so we will have 15 of that covered. But the timing is such that I would need the entire 21,000 appropriated and then we paid with, it's a reimbursement.
It's a reimbursement, right. Something the Board of Finance can do without going to town meeting. So the worst case scenario is the town from the general fund, is that what you wanted me to call it? Undesignated fund balance is allocating, we would ask you to allocate 21,000, at least 15 would be reimbursed. If the cost of Bloom Shapiro is 19, the town expends 4,000 that's not reimbursed to do the put together a proposal for the town for the new accounting system. Is that clear? Is that clear?
Yeah. Does anyone care to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
There's a motion and a second to appropriate $21,000 for the software.
Well, Lisa, do you want to, what specifically,
Do you want
how do you want the motion to read?
specific language?
Well, what do we want to say from the undesignated?
For what though? For what?
For consulting services to prep an RFP for an accounting system.
I think it should be clear, that's all.
Okay. So there's a motion and a second. Is there any
Especially
discussion?
20, is that what you put in the number on that?
21.
21, what do we need to town meeting, 21?
No. 25.
Okay.
Well, we're not sure, it's gonna be
You said we said we might
maximum
get-
of 21. I'm gonna certainly try and keep it to the shorter end of the,
Didn't you say at one point we might get a little more back than?
They had kind of put that tease out there that there was a possibility of getting more, but, that was not the case.
It was 15.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
And again, that's probably a July 16, it's probably, we're a ways away from that.
Right, this would just be phase one in which we put out an RFP, and then we'd have to go to town meeting for the full, what the cost of the system would be.
And so maybe beyond the budget season, at some point, Jeff Ziplo or somebody can come in and
Yeah,
talk to the Board of Finance a little
absolutely.
bit about
I think
the
you'd be-
project and what we're
And
looking
the
for.
efficiencies we're gonna get with it.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that it? Thank you.
That's it.
Selectmen's report?
Sure, a bunch of things. I don't know if you saw this, Barry, in the New London Day, Old Lyme and their beach communities are preparing for a possible sewer mandate from the state. Unfortunately, we were first, on their list, but now it's moving right along the shoreline. The towns from Westbrook, Clinton, Old Lyme, the state is saying you're either gonna sewer or you're gonna upgrade your septic, whatever you gotta do it. And Old Lyme has a real problem over there. I was at so, as I cautioned you at the last meeting about state aid, I think we've given you a budget expenditures, and Bob has estimated revenues as best we can. I think anybody who's been reading the paper it would appear to me, and well, I don't want to say it too strongly, but the budget that is before the legislature is generally perceived to be not even a workable document for the legislature. They're not even, it's as if it's been discarded before it's been considered. I mean, that is what I'm reading, and quite frankly, that's kind of what I'm hearing from our representatives in this area. The budget that we've placed before you is a 0.3 of a mil, and we've already gone over that and some of the statistics that I cited last time. That's based on the revenue that the state is currently proposing. I've had one state senator say to me, the governor held the towns and cities harmless in this budget. In other words, he flat funded them essentially, all their state aid. But he cut everywhere else. And there's been such an outcry. You guys are the only ones who weren't hurt. They're gonna come and get you. They're gonna come back to the state aid eventually to save some of the other programs. I mean, I read in the paper today, the governor's guard, the horse guard was cut. And they don't, they're gonna say that they're gonna have to get rid of the horse guard, which has been here since the revolution, 200 years ago. So, so that's number one. In addition to that, there's a lot of the same topics, and I want to address what John said in terms of regionalizing 911, and we have a fire chief and a police chief here. That conversation was started about 2-3 years ago by the state of Connecticut. And Waterford, Montville, East Lyme, right, have been trying to do it for about 3 years. But the problem is with the various unions in each town, they need they're getting special state legislation to try to do it. They tried to do it on the state level a little bit, and it backfired on them. Certain towns were very unhappy because certain stations were dark at certain times. It can be done, John. I think from a technology point of view, it can absolutely be done. We are, from a state solution point of view, I think we are so far from that, and it really does have to be either a state mandated solution or a state solution that the fire chiefs and the police chiefs are going to be able to live with. We have too many PSAPs. We'll call them that. Is that the right acronym for it, PSAP?
The acronym's correct, too many is not correct.
What?
So too many's not
Yeah,
correct,
well,
but the acronym is correct.
we have 101 out of 169. I think we have too many. Some people might disagree with me. We have 101 in 169 towns. So it's a concept that I've explored, that we've looked at. I've looked at it with both chief of fire and chief of police. It's just not, in this state at this time, it's not that simple a solution. Couple of things that are going on in the legislature. The car tax is coming up again. Okay? So I was at a CCM meeting today. In the bill that is proposed, they are proposing a statewide mill rate on the cars of 29. 29. So how's that going to work? All right? So what they're going to do now, a woman, the mayor of East Hartford, I think it was East Hartford, stood up and said, well, our mill rate is higher than that. How are we going to be protected? And they're like, don't worry, the money we get from the statewide mill rate, we're going to make you whole. So the money that, if you have to reduce your car mill rate from 35 to 29, we'll give you the revenue that you're missing out on. That results, where are they going to get the money from? They're going to get it from an 18.5 mill rate, which would be a 63% increase from 18.5 right now to 29 in the town of Old Saybrook. That is alive right now, the statewide mill rate. Now, I don't know that, it won't be for July 1/15, it'll be, I believe it would be for July 1/16. But that is alive and well, and it is inequitable statewide. There's no doubt it is inequitable to pay an entirely different, Bob's taxes in Old Saybrook might be, $500. In Hartford, they'd be $1,500. That's not right. I mean, I think we can all agree on that. That's been our system for so long, though, that there's so many towns that depend on that extra $1,000 that they collect, though. So to take it away from them, the money has to come from somewhere else. Two other things that are alive and well, and I say this with the utmost respect for our public safety personnel, is they're calling it a mental workers' compensation bill. And that's for someone who would witness the maiming, basically the death or maiming of another human being. I think it arises out of the Sandy Hook tragedy. That bill is alive and well. The problem with that is on a local level, that could lead to large insurance exposures. And it would have to be a certified doctor saying PTSD has occurred in this individual. But that could be obviously a large liability on any one large or very small town. I mean, that's the thing. It could be a very small town that gets hit by a tragedy and would have this liability on its books. There is some discussion about making it a statewide solution, though. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with workers' comp. Lisa used to work for the Second Injury Fund. Second Injury Fund was for very long-term injuries, as I recall.
For places that didn't have insurance and for.
Or if carriers went belly up or stuff like that. So they're talking about possibly a fund, and that would be okay with the towns and cities. Hey, if we can create a fund that's a statewide fund, now where that money would come from, don't know. Probably a tax of some sort. But that bill is alive and well. It came up last year. It didn't get out of committee. It's probably going to get out of committee this year. There was a quote from, and I forget which committee chairman it was. He says, "I don't care how much this costs towns and cities. This is going to happen this year." And that was a direct quote. It's a very well-intended law, but towns obviously are worried about the financial considerations. There's a bill out there, and I know it's at least for firefighters. I don't know if it's for police officers, but I think it might be for public safety in general. Similar to heart and hypertension, a cancer presumption. You would have to prove that your cancer was caused, the firefighter or the public safety personnel would have to prove that the cancer was caused by work-related inhalation or something to that effect. That could be rebutted, obviously, by the defense. But that bill is currently alive in the legislature, similar to what we were going through with heart and hypertension. Some good news, prevailing wage did get out of committee. As many of you know, if we renovate, Larry knows, because we did the town garage, but anything over $100,000 project generally has to be prevailing wage, which is basically union wages. On renovations, $400,000 for new construction. Came out of committee last night, $1 million, $1 million, $2 million. So there's some hope that the idea being towns can bid these projects and not get, they can take a low bid that may not be a union shop and save money. But that bill came out of committee. I don't know how far it'll get. There has been a lot of progress on the stormwater bill that I brought to your attention a long time ago. That's still being worked out. A lot of details on that. Still being worked out. That's not anything in final yet, but they did back off mandatory leaf pickup and a lot of those ideas. That there's just a lot of stuff that comes out of the legislature every year that is just it's, to be honest with you, it's somewhat shocking to read it sometimes. So those were some of the items. There's one other bill that the governor proposed, and it was brought to my attention about a week ago. So the governor proposed a Connecticut Transit Corridor Development Authority. The authority is intended to assist and promote development within within a 1/2 mile radius of transit stations. That would include Old Saybrook. The bill would allow the authority to build whatever it wants within a 1/2 mile of any train or fast track station with no local participation or control. The governor it would be an appointed board by the governor. The municipality would be ex officio but non-voting. And that was actually proposed. Whether that authority actually gets created this year, it may. Obviously, if it does get created, I think the towns and cities will have a bigger seat at the table than that. But that was brought to my attention, obviously, because we have a train station. We did the calculation. It was it's like 500 acres. If you do a 1/2 mile radius, it's some very large tract of land that you could have possible eminent domain authority
So they could take
over.
the monkey farm.
Oh my God.
And that authority has bonding power too.
That's true.
So, just generally overall, there's a lot out there still, and those are just the bills that are proposed. That has nothing to do with the revenues that, and the cuts that the governor has proposed in other areas that may eventually affect the revenues to Old Saybrook and a lot of other towns. As I said, we've been fortunate to have a little grand list growth in this year's budget. The budget as it stands before you is 0.3 of a mil. And town government at 1.8, and the original Board of Ed budget under 3. I read this section of the Current almost every day, and it gives you a real good feedback on what other towns and cities are doing. And those numbers, compared to what you're seeing all over the state, are very good numbers. And we are all faced with the same pressures. Generally, we are service delivery towns, or service delivery models, and we pay people, and we buy equipment, so we can provide services. So the budget, I think, that's been handed you is, I think just as an overall theme, you need to keep that in mind. So, that's kind of what I came to talk about. I don't know. What else?
Could I make a
Yeah,
comment
please, Bob.
about the revenue from the state? Last meeting I gave you the projected recommendations for revenues other than taxes. On the intergovernmental side, the total was only 1.2 million from the state, and 650,000 of that is in the ECS payment for education. It's hard for me to believe that even if the state decided to cut municipal aid a lot, that would hurt us a lot.
Right.
Because, with our $2.2 billion grand list, 1/10 of a mil is 220,000. And it's just hard to believe that with ECS probably being left alone, the other 600,000 could be cut up to 1/10 of a mil. I don't see possibly going further than that.
Right.
So.
Right, we're not gonna lose $500,000.
Right.
It would be proportional, and if it was 5 to 10%, that'd be a lot probably.
Yes.
So, there is one item in the budget that I pointed out to several of you, and it's storage. It's a storage item. It's $30,000 in the budget for storage. When we were building the police station, a storage shed was asked for, and that was not included in the police station project. Primarily to be stored in that storage shed is emergency management items. Actually I have the handout and it's from Office of Emergency Management. And basically, it's pallets of food and water, and it's a lot of emergency management items. Meals ready to eat. The chief can explain what some of these items are. Public health trailer. What are some of the other items, chief, in here?
Blankets, pillows, cots, showering supplies.
Yeah, so, and obviously, the original storage building was there to basically house the emergency management truck, which is used on emergency sites. So there's 30,000 in there. We were hoping to rent a place. I wouldn't do it without Board of Finance. Obviously, it's in the budget. We would need Board of Finance approval. But I want you to know that there was a water main break, for instance, 2 months ago, Maple and 154. And we brought water out. There was water out that was to the citizens of the town. And water came from where it's being stored right now, which is at the current police station. But really, that's emergency management items. We are going to need to store these items somewhere. Cots, okay? After the hurricane Sandy, I mean, you go over to the high school and you see the cots, and you're happy you have them. This stuff is old Saybrook's. We own it. We need it when we have an emergency, and it's good to have. It's paid for. I think all of us know that when there is an emergency, we've been pretty fortunate to have the supplies that we do have, whether it's water, cots, traffic. When traffic signals are down, we have all the we have stop signs that we can put out so that there's not multi-car accidents. We are going to need some money. I mean, do we need the 30,000 for emergency management? If we want to store, if we want to protect the large truck, which is, we have on the books, we insure that truck for about $500,000. That truck is either going to sit outside or it's going to be stored inside. Obviously, stored inside is better. We all know that. By putting our cars in the garage at night, they last longer. There are options if we do want to rent space. It's probably about $25,000 a year, 25 to 30, if we want to rent space for all this, including the emergency management truck. If we want to keep the truck like it is being stored right now, which is basically under a tent, right? That can be done. It would be done on the police station site. But we still have lots of palletized food and water that needs to go somewhere. And we probably need to rent space, and it needs to be temperature controlled. There needs to be a number in there. That entire line item, I'm asking you not to eliminate it. It's in the budget. It falls under emergency management. It doesn't fall under daily operations of the police department. We've looked at renting space for all of this, and it's about $25,000. If we're not going to put the truck in a garage, then we could probably get away with a little less than that. So when you are considering the budget, you need to consider putting, I have a $30,000 placeholder in here. I'm asking you to consider allowing us to rent some temperature-controlled space. I don't know where. I don't know if it's in the industrial park, CubeSmart. I don't know. We'll look into it. But I would ask you to put in something, leave something in here for meals ready to eat and water, and a lot of the other stuff that we are thankful for when we have an emergency. So, but I did 30,000 as a placeholder.
For rental, not for a building.
It would be rental.
Can you use the new police building for any of that storage?
It depends what you want to keep in the new storage bins.
Do we have a number, square footage?
shelf life,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we're talking generalities, but I'd like to see some numbers.
About 3,000 square feet, not including the truck.
If you include the truck, how many square feet do you have?
About, well, I think we sized it out at about 4,000. So,
3,000 square feet to store supplies.
to store supplies.
It's a house. You're telling me that
Well,
we
if you're
have
putting
3,000
hou-
square feet worth of water and ready-to-meal,
Um,
blankets and cots.
Chief, you're gonna have to help me with some of the other items that might go in there.
So your analogy of it's a house is correct? That it's a house for the entire town. So our supplies that we have can't even shelter 1/10 of our population. So when you talk about this equipment, it's actually small scale compared to what we would have to do in an emergency. So we have built with the Board of Finance's support and the Board of Selectmen's support, certainly over the last 10 years, a very decent emergency management program in Old Saybrook that has us prepared at a certain level to sustain ourselves for 48 to 72 hours, which is the federal model based on when federal assistance will come. So during Storm Irene and Storm Sandy, we did not see additional assets in our town until at least that 72-hour period. But there were certainly needs that had to be met for our residents before that. So we take the oath of, health, safety, and welfare very serious in emergency management, because those really come into play. When there's a hurricane and there's no power, which means 50% of our town has no water, which means we can be dealing with water contamination if there's flooding near the well areas. That's a significant need. People need water. So we have to provide food-grade hoses so they can fill water. We have to supply regular water. If it's a hot time, I think some of you here actually came and got ice that you needed to keep some of your food safe so it didn't spoil and we didn't promote disease spreading through some bad bacteria. So these are all important things. When we have to stand up a shelter, and by the way, a shelter is not just for a hurricane. Shelter could be, God forbid, tonight there could be a hazardous materials incident where the fire chief deems that we have to evacuate a neighborhood. Several years ago, we evacuated a hotel because there was an armed gunman inside threatening to kill people. Those folks went to a shelter where we had to stand up immediately, cots, blankets. There's certain federal standards that you have to meet when you open a shelter. So we have those supplies. It's not a lot for the whole town, but we own them, and it's important to keep them in good condition for when we need them.
So, the other thing about when you say a house, it's also, if you stuffed it into a room where you wouldn't be able to move into the room, but you want to be able to access it also. So, when you provide walking space and the ability to actually access some of this stuff, that's where the space comes in. I could show you the stacks of, it's pallets. So it can't go into a basement, it has to basically go in it, you're not gonna, we talked about putting it, I said, can we put it in the basement? You can't, because it's, so.
And there is some supplies stored in other spots around town. So we have a shed behind the high school. In that shed, we share that with our public health partners. Half the shed is stocked with our supplies already. So we're not talking about moving those, we're talking about the items that just happen to be stored at 6 Custom Drive because we had 10,000 square feet of open storage space. That's where they are, because we're there. Just because I serve as the emergency management director and the police chief doesn't mean that those emergency management supplies follow me wherever I work. The town assets, emergency management falls right under the direct oversight of the first selectman. So we have to figure out where they're gonna be housed.
So we're gonna have, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Didn't you, one meeting at the police building committee say you had a place for $4,000 a year?
Say again, John?
Couldn't you have a place for $4,000 a year that could be rented to house some of that stuff?
Yes,
So
I do.
why is it now 30,000?
No, we had a place that rented, it's 25,000 a year.
25. That's the first time I've heard that number.
Yeah, it's on Custom Drive. A gentleman actually walked into my,
I know.
that's the guy,
That's why I
yes.
got the $4,000 number.
I don't remember.
It's 4,000, I don't know.
Square feet.
4,000.
Square feet.
Yeah,
I'll take the $4,000 deal all day long.
No, the place that was proposed was about 25,000 a year. That's what he proposed it. Yeah. And by the way, I checked with some realtors, you know, just kind of get an idea as to storage space. You know, it can be $550 a square foot.
Yeah,
And
that's right.
yeah, and that's what it comes out to.
The thing was, when we were talking about this, we were talking about taking the rent from the police station, and we're gonna pay off the bonds, and we're gonna cover that. Now we're short $30,000 on that rent that we're supposed to pay towards the bond.
Pay towards
Because
what bond?
Pay for the bond when you go to the police station. You said, you were always talking, once we stop the rent, part of that rent's gonna go towards the
Well,
payment, so the bonds. And you were talking 166, so now we're 30,000
It
short of
doesn't
that.
go towards it, it comes off the budget, it just comes out, you know, I mean, so. Yeah,
So,
listen.
we're gonna have, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to invite emergency management in to talk about
Yeah,
it.
okay.
So,
I just want to, it's something I've talked about with a lot of you individually, and, you know, I just want to throw it out there, because it's,
any
I think it's
questions?
important
Go ahead.
they seem to go hand in hand though,
What?
emergency management and police. I mean, you look at the police budget, it's got emergency management stuff on it.
Mhm.
Emergency management stuff has applicable things to police. You know, to me, there is no screen.
What?
It is
They're-
all in the same.
Can I just ask you what, in the police budget, is emergency management related, if you don't mind?
Yeah, you have,
And we're gonna talk about the police budget soon. Yeah.
you have emergencies, you know, hopefully, I have to get to my other notes.
but there, so a lot of the stuff that we just identified though has nothing to do with, I mean, the day-to-day operations of the police. I mean, if I were to store all this stuff right here, it has nothing to do with the police department on a day-to-day basis, and it probably would take up,
But it's the police department that uses it and the fire department that uses it, so
in
it's,
an emergency, right?
right, and that's what
Well,
it is. I mean, chief has the oversight of emergency management. He is the oversight of the police. Therefore, who else is the one who's accessing it? Am I gonna go access it? Is that my budget? Is it the town budget? No. So it really is one and the same. I mean, so that's like
Well, I mean,
saying,
the whole
let's take
town
the
budget
water-
is one and the
that's like-
same then.
That's
I
like
mean-
saying, well, let's take the water budget out of, or supplies out of the police department because it's being used by, you know, town hall or General Joe Schmo walking in. And the emergency management is controlled by the chief of police.
Yeah, in this
He's the one
town, in
that's
this
using
town,
all
you're
these
right,
supplies.
you're right, in this town, it is the same person, you're right.
So it really is one and the same.
Who uses those, yeah, they use the supplies in the event of an emergency, right. You're right about that.
So to me, it's,
But it's the town, well, they're not one and the same. But it's used by public safety in the event of an emergency for the benefit of the population of the town.
okay, then what distinguishes when these items get used?
Usually when an emergency is declared, as it was in Sandy or the storm, quite frankly, during the blizzard, we were talking about whether we were gonna lose power. And we were talking about sheltering again. Believe me, thank God we didn't have to do it. And that would have opened up all these items to come out. And in fact, we were storing, we had cots at the high school 2 months ago. We had a bunch, I don't even know how many, Rob, you were doing it, probably 100 cots at the high school ready to go, and that was, you're right. So a dispatcher was putting cots in the high school in case of an emergency where emergency management supplies would have been used. You know, Heather McNeil is available in emergencies too, you know. She's not part of the police department though.
Yes, sir.
So just, I know we're gonna come in and discuss this, but just so Breck and others can understand this. None of those things can happen unless the CEO of the town of Old Saybrook says, use it. So an emergency is only declared when the chief elected official signs a piece of paper or verbally authorizes that we've declared a local state of emergency. I, as the emergency management director, can't move an asset, prepare a cot, fluff a pillow without his express, in many cases, every time we've done it, written consent. A formal form that gets sent to the Secretary of the State, the town clerk's office, and the State Department of Homeland Security. It's a very serious event as a CEO to declare a local state of emergency. So serious that it was a significant topic of discussion during our last charter revision set of meetings, and an actual revision to our charter on how that's done. Just because I'm the police chief and the emergency management director doesn't mean the supplies follow me. So if I chose not to be the emergency management director, or Carl for some reason found cause and said, I don't want you to serve as the emergency management director anymore, does that mean the supplies go to the gentleman's home or lady's home that becomes the new EMD? So they're town assets and they need to be in a temperature controlled facility, but they don't necessarily follow the department head. If Chief Rankin became the emergency management director, we wouldn't expect him to take a fire truck and park it outside to put all the pallets in the firehouse. So what I don't want is, when we actually have the conversation, is I would respectfully request that the conversation not focus so much on who the agency head is, but more on the supplies that are needed in a crisis for the town, if that's fair.
Okay.
Sure.
When you come to that meeting in a couple of weeks, could you bring a complete inventory of the items that you have?
Sure, absolutely.
What's the shelf life of the food, the water?
So the food's generally about a 5-year shelf life, the meal's ready to eat, and we rotate that with the federal government. And our water, it's bottled water, so a couple of years, but we wind up cycling through that.
So the MREs get cycled if you don't use them?
We can cycle them out with FEMA. Absolutely.
How long does it take? Why wait for 2 weeks?
Brad, to your point, we can give you a list of the inventory, but you guys can certainly come in and look at the stuff. Just understand this: it's very easy to go look at a pallet of water and say, "We don't need this." Go get it when there's an emergency. Your emergency management director can't be in line at Stop and Shop or Big Y or Walmart with everybody else while they're buying their emergency supplies 3 days in advance of a hurricane. And understand that we use it for more than just those significant events. During the last 2 storms, the residents of Old Saybrook were nothing less than thrilled to be the community that had water and ice available when no other communities around us had those assets. And I want to make sure that we continue to be able to offer that to our residents.
Any other questions for Carl?
I know you weren't storing ice. Where did the ice come from that you had ice and nobody else had it?
So we pre-purchased ice, knowing that we had a federal declaration would be reimbursed for it. So there was actually no ice available in Connecticut, and we rented 2 refrigerated Ryder trucks and went to Massachusetts and brought ice in advance of the storm and brought it back. That was so successful that FEMA actually bought us an ice machine as part of our reimbursement process, so we can bag some of our ice in advance of going to get other ice. So if it's a warm climate storm, ice is important. If it's a blizzard, no one really cares about ice. So you have to watch the forecast, you have to look at the temperatures, and you have to do with it. Our toiletry supplies. We gave out over 700 showers during Storm Sandy. We announced we were going to open, I think it was like at 1 or 3, and we had a line of 100 and something people waiting a couple hours in advance of that. So when you think of your very basic needs, you haven't showered for a couple days because you have no water, you have no power, getting that little hotel bar of soap and a fresh washcloth and a fresh towel and a little thing of shampoo really means the world to a lot of people. And I would hate to see our program, I hate to see us lower the bar. I think our citizens have become accustomed to expect something, and all they're expecting are basic needs. And I really think it's our responsibility to continue to provide that. But to do that, we need your help.
Do you have anything else? Anything going on with current budget? This year's,
Oh,
we got sand, salt, snow,
oh yeah.
not bad.
No, nothing that jumps out at me.
No questions for Carl? All right, so, next on the agenda is the Police Commission and Police Department budget request. The chairman is not here yet, probably another 15 or 20 minutes. Chief, do you want to still wait?
Yeah, I'd like to be able to wait for the chairman. He gets out of work at 8, he works in Old Lyme. Hopefully traffic's good.
So what I would do, and I don't know, I would entertain a recess for 20 minutes. So we could wait for the chairman. You can go wherever you want. We could wait for the chairman of the police commission to come. So we will reconvene at 20 after.
Or when he's here?
Or when he's here, whichever's first. Is that okay?
Sure.
Any restrictions? Alright, so.
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, so we will reconvene at 8:17.
Yes.
So welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for indulging in my work schedule. I attempted to switch time, get time off, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and it just didn't happen, so. I'll be happy to answer any questions that I can, mostly on a global nature, but specifics I may have to ask the chief to respond to. As you're all aware, this starts out as the chief's budget, goes to the police commission, becomes the police commission's budget, goes to the board of selectmen, becomes the selectmen's budget, and now here we are at the board of finance. Once again, the budget book is the same as the last several years, so I believe everyone should be pretty familiar with how it is laid out. Obviously, we'd be happy to entertain any questions. Just a couple of notes, 88% of our budget is personnel. 88.2 or something like that, I believe. Approximately 10.25% is expenses and supplies, and 1.75% is professional services. There's been no increase in the capital budget, just to pay for the police cars that you're all aware of. Most of the increase is due to personnel increases due to labor contracts. In here, we have done our best with the help of the architect to guesstimate expenses for the new building. Unfortunately, the first year, it's gonna be kind of a big unknown, but he has experience in these types of buildings, and we've pretty much relied on his judgment to come up with expenses as far as the operation of the new building is concerned. And of course, another large expense of the expense is gasoline, which who knows what it's gonna do price-wise. I mean, it bottomed out for a while, it's gone up a little bit, now it seems to be holding steady again. I don't know when that contract goes out, or
I have the authority under the charter to lock in commodities, and we've locked in our commodities for next year.
okay, good.
At the bottomed out point of your sentence, that's when I did it.
Good, excellent. That'll help with that line item a little bit. And that's basically all I have for a kind of opening statement, if you will. So we'll be happy to entertain any questions that you have. If you could please, if you're asking a question about a specific item, just let us know what page you're on so that we all can find the correct page and be on the same page together.
What was you had a 3% increase for personnel. What was the contract percentage increase? I forget.
I think it's 3%.
About 3%, yeah.
3%?
For the police union, 3%. For the dispatchers, their contract expires, but we put a placeholder in of 2.5%.
You mentioned the 94,000 in the budget for the cars. When is that lease up?
This is the second year of a 4-year.
This is the second year?
Yeah, just made the payment last
Yeah,
week.
John, just.
made the
this budget-
second payment, so this would be the
budget
third. This will be the third
But we're
payment in this
Yeah,
budget.
15, 16 will be the third.
So there would be
16, 17.
16, 17, there'd be one more payment and
So
then.
we're halfway through that.
Chief, I'd like to ask you a question. You know that this year's budget is, you are 27% of this year's budget. With the new budget going forward, you'll be almost 28% of the total budget for the town. When I moved to town in 2000, we were 23.3%. What percentage do you think a town of this size should spend on public safety?
Well, I think that's a good question, John. But first of all, I don't know how you come to the 27% number. So when I first heard that 27% number,
Oh, is this yours?
I went to the finance director and I said, you gotta help me with this. Are we 27% of the entire municipal budget? And I don't know if that includes the Board of Education or not. But as a taxpayer, when I go see Barry, and I do, I pay one tax bill, which is for the whole town. So I don't know where the 27% is. I would have to defer to the finance director on the actual percentages.
It excludes the debt service and it includes the benefits. Just like in this budget, you have over $960,000 in benefits. So you add that to the 3.2 million, you come up to 4,252,000.
So that's why we couldn't figure out what it was.
Yeah.
But you have to count that.
You have to count it, it's cost of doing business.
Well, but the format was changed years ago to include benefits as a town expense, not as a department.
I know, but
Expense.
it's still a cost of business affecting to
Right.
that department.
And I don't deny that. Here's what I will say. So in the town of Old Saybrook, the Department of Police Services operating budget will always be the largest municipal budget.
I agree.
Will always be the largest municipal budget because of a couple of very obvious reasons. We're the only municipal department that's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So when you think of all the agencies inside just town hall, they're Monday through Friday generally, 8 to 4, 4:30 generally, weekends off, holidays off. So we're open a significant amount of time more than any other municipal entity. So we're gonna cost more. Second of all, we're the most personnel-dependent agency that we have in the town outside of the Board of Education because we're direct service delivery. And the only way we can deliver our services is by the use of people, highly trained professional people. So to your question of how much do I think, I don't have a percentage. As you know, we've talked back and forth many budget years. I'm not a percentage type of person, I'm a dollar person because I pay a dollar amount when I pay my taxes. And when I look at a line item that went up, was $1,000 and went to $2,000, that's a higher percentage than just saying it went up $1,000. So I like to look at the numbers rather than the percent. So I apologize for not answering your question directly, but I don't have an answer to that question.
Is there any place where we could get a frame of reference on towns of our size and what percentage they spend on their budget? I have not been able to locate any.
And here's why, nor have I. So John, as I've told you privately and very publicly over the past years, you've made me a better budgeter because you ask some of the best questions. Years ago, you were the one that forced me to look at other police department budgets in other towns.
That's why I'm not doing that this time.
Well, because you got me to do that on my own. But here's what we found when we did that, right? There's no apples to apples comparison from town to town. And let me just cite a few examples. There are some communities that inside their police department budget, they don't even have a line item or they barely fund a gasoline line item. And that's something that there's one line item for the whole community, or it's something that they choose to fund at the end of their fiscal year when they're reconciling their budget. We don't do that. There are some towns that take their emergency dispatch center and have it as a complete separate budget, where in ours it's close to $500,000. So it's very difficult to find those apples to apples unless I went to a town, spent an inordinate amount of time to figure out where all those little things are. the only thing missing, and not really missing, but the only thing not listed in our operating budget is our fringe benefits. But that was because, as a town, we decided about 3, 4, 5 years ago not to have that as everyone's operating budget. I'd put it back in. I believe in the taxpayer knowing exactly what it costs, but this is what the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen has decided to make our budget look like.
John, one other thing I'd like to add. When you try and compare apples to apples, town to town, you also have to take into consideration that in Old Saybrook, the police department is the first responders for 911 call of any kind, whether it's medical, whether it's, we respond to the medical, fires, obviously 911 for police services, and a lot of other towns that's not the case. A lot of times the fire department might be the medical, particularly first responders. So once again, it's to get a comparison, you have to really dig into numbers and figure out what you're talking about, because was it 1,400 medical calls we went on last year? So there's 1,300 or 1,400 incidences where an officer has to respond. Now, some of those are Mrs. Jones needed help getting out of a chair. He's in, he's out, but there are other medical incidences where a significant amount of time is spent. And so, once again, it's hard to compare even one medical incident to another in terms of how much time is used.
Yeah, I understand. That's why I use the year 2000, so it would be apples to apples.
The year 2000, I'm sorry.
The percentage total of the year 2000 for the Old Saybrook Police Department. So I just brought it up to 2000 versus 2015 and 2016.
Here's an interesting exercise that I did, and I didn't bring it with me because I didn't think it was relevant, but I'll share it with you in front of the whole world on the camera. If you take the budget as it was in 08 and 09 or 9-10, whichever time reference I used, compared to our current budget, and you apply the federal inflation rate to it, I think you would be shocked at how little the budget has actually grown in the last 5 or 6 years, just based on the inflation marker. I did that because a lot of people said, holy cow, during your tenure, the budget has exploded. And it really has not. That's not true. So I think when we look at it in that context, and I'd love to meet with you offline and show you how I did that, see if we agree in the calculations, but it's pretty amazing understanding that over the 5-6 year period, there's contractual raises every single year.
Right.
And you'll notice that in that inflation calculation, our budget rises either at those percentages or a little bit less on many of the line items.
Thank you.
Rick?
Chief, looking at your personnel, you have 25 policemen, patrolmen, detectives. And last year you had the same amount. And you have promoted one of the patrolmen this year. And I'm curious why you have wanting to have another promotion from a patrol to a sergeant, whereas then you'd be reducing your number of patrolmen that are on the street.
So I'm not sure if I entirely follow your question, but let me try to answer it and see if I'm answering what you're actually asking. So we had a sergeant retire. We have not yet backfilled that supervisory position. In any municipal police department, supervision is paramount. So there is not a shift that is deployed on the road without a shift leader. When you take a look at overtime replacement, from a budgeting standpoint, it is more expensive to backfill a sergeant, someone that has more tenure, higher rank, than it is to backfill a patrolman position. So right now, being down that supervisory position, we're seeing our current officer corps, our current sergeants, working more overtime to backfill that supervisory position.
Who are you down? Because I looked at last year's personnel versus this year's personnel. You have one chief, full name. You have 5 sergeants this year, last year. You have 2 detectives this year, last year. You have 1 detective sergeant this year, last year. You have 13 patrolmen this year, last year. 2 master sergeants this year, last year. 1 lieutenant this year, last year, and 2 SROs this year, last year.
So you.
So you in essence already backfilled Gardner with your promotion of Larry Smith.
That's incorrect.
Well, you went from patrol last year to sergeant this year.
That is incorrect. He was promoted last year. So maybe
That's in your book.
can I please just answer the question?
Go ahead. But in your book that you presented us last year, I've gone through your personnel line item, if at all. And your Larry Smith went from patrolman to a sergeant. You had a retirement replacement, and then you have another patrolman that was hired that wasn't listed on the, in the budget. And those 2 people would be Neil and I think Anthony. So I'm kind of curious, because you really do, you have 25 people here, and
We've just finished 25 people for how many years?
but you've already filled Gardner. I mean, you told us Gardner was half, 3/4 IT.
Breck, I just need an opportunity to respond. I keep doing that and I stop because you're
Go for it.
asking more questions. So I just want to be respectful to you, but I'd like to answer the question. So last year in the budget book, I believe you alluded to a line item that said, like a replacement line item, supervisor replacement or sergeant replacement. That became Larry Smith, and that was last budget year. So Sergeant Smith did not get promoted to replace Sergeant Gardner, because Sergeant Smith was Sergeant Smith, while Sergeant Gardner was still Sergeant Gardner. So when Sergeant Gardner left his employment, he left a vacant supervisory spot. That's what's listed in our book now.
But you still have 25 people.
We will not grow past 25 people without, obviously, this board's authority, but more importantly, the police commission's endorsement of that. But the same amount of people, so we have 25 people, right? A sergeant leaves.
I get that. I've looked at this inside and out. I'm just saying that, I compared the personnel from last year, personnel this year, your line item saying replacement sergeants, replacement for a retired sergeant. And in this year's, we have 2 new patrolmen, and you have the Larry Smith going from patrolman to sergeant. This is in last year's budget book. So in essence, you have your 25 and 25, so I'm curious why you want to have a 6th sergeant and then go down to 12 patrolmen.
So we had 6 sergeants at all times. Larry Smith replaced another sergeant who retired. Because Sergeant Gardner vacated his supervisory spot,
I got that.
we now need to replace him. A patrolman is always hired to replace the retirement of one of the 25. So please let me just finish this 30-second explanation. We're 25 strong. A senior member, a sergeant, leaves. The commission hires a patrolman to start the academy. It replaces the body, one of the 25. Now we have to take one of the 25 and promote one of those people to the rank of sergeant to replace the person who vacated that. So at budget time, because our budget process takes 6 months, by the time I submit it at the very end of December, the first week of January to the police commission, all the way through the budget referendum, we're still open and we're still moving. So there are some times where we have to list things as retirement replacement. So for example, on page 3 in our budget explanation, you see retirement replacement listed at $4,472. That's obviously not a person. That's the delta between a top step patrolman and a first step sergeant.
You had said in the, when you were talking to the police commission, that was going to be a promotion.
That's what that is, ma'am.
And
So
that's what I'm questioning, why you feel the need then to promote, have 6 sergeants and 12 patrolmen.
So, Brett, with all due respect, we've always had 6 sergeants. We've never not had that. We might have been down due to retirement, but it takes us a while. The promotional process is almost 6 months.
Well, but I mean, you'd factored that in, because there's one, and I'm not sure which patrolman it was, last year was in the budget at half the salary.
Because he only worked half the year.
Right, and so he's been filtrated in here.
Because he'll work the full year this year, so his full salary's in for the coming year. So Sergeant Gardner left. I need to promote a patrolman to sergeant to take over those supervisory responsibilities. Because he vacated a spot, please let me finish. Because he vacated a spot, I'm now at 24. To make 25, I hire a new patrolman. I wait till that patrolman's through the academy, 26 weeks, 10 weeks of FTO, before that patrolman becomes a true personnel asset, before I recommend to the commission that we promote a patrolman to backfill that supervisory role.
You have 27 officers listed here,
2 are SROs that are
SROs.
part-time.
And they're part-time.
and there's your 25.
Correct.
That's what I'm saying. There's your 25. So I'm questioning why you need to go from another patrolman to a sergeant when last year you had 5 sergeants. And I'm going based off of the information you gave me last year, that you had 5 sergeants, of which one of them you said was Sergeant Gardner, and he did IT.
Sergeant
So
Gardner
you
also
only had-
supervised shifts,
About 4.5
4.5 1.
sergeants. Because
No,
you said Sergeant Gardner was about
that's-
half part-time.
Brett, I gotta be honest with you, I have no idea where you're coming up with the numbers. I'm trying to do my best to answer your question. Here's what I can say as an overall summary. We have 25 full-time law enforcement officers. Out of the 25, there are various ranks. A patrol sergeant is a first-line supervisor and is paramount to the police operation. Supervision is key on every single shift. We have maintained 6 sergeants for a very long time. When a sergeant retires, he gets backfilled with a new hire, a patrolman. When that patrolman becomes a personnel asset, we look to the commission to take one of our tenured patrolmen, who passes a very rigorous promotional process, to backfill that supervisory role. Because until that supervisory role is backfilled, the current slate of sergeants are working additional shifts, because we will always deploy a sergeant, a patrol leader, on every single shift.
Okay, fine.
Well, I guess the question is, I ask, is Sergeant Gardner was your IT person. So my question to you, and I can check the payroll records if it's record, how many days a month did he play sergeant versus IT? And really what you're doing here is you're asking for an IT person and a sergeant, and it's one or the other. But I don't see how it's both.
So first of all, with all due respect, Brad, no one plays the role of sergeant. It's a prestigious department, position in our department, and they're true first-line patrol leaders. And they have significant responsibility
You don't have a sense
running their
of
shift.
humor, sir.
Excuse me?
You don't have a sense of humor, I guess.
Brad, I think that's unfortunately long gone, quite honest with you. It is necessary to deploy these people. So Sergeant Gardner, a sergeant, backfilled shifts. He was scheduled IT, a sergeant called out sick, was put right into that spot. His supervisory assistants helped us from when we got busy and we didn't have to call on another supervisor because other things were going on. He was there. He was never 40 hours a week information technology as a patrol sergeant. He just wasn't. The information technology position in the budget is a per diem stipend position. It's not full-time. It's nowhere close to being compensated at full-time. So I have the need of a sergeant position and the need of IT. What I'm trying to do is civilianize information technology, because I think it's smart at this point to take that very critical position, information technology, everything we do, from the 911 call to touching the radio, everything touches information technology, and make that a civilian position, and keep all the sworn officers doing sworn officer duties.
I still see it that if you came to us and said, look, the IT person worked 15 hours a week, which was Gardner, and then he worked 25 hours or 27 hours, I don't know if you're on a 40 or 42-hour week, as a sergeant. But you're coming to us, the way I see it is, you're looking for an IT person at 45,000, if I believe, and then you're also looking at a sergeant. And
So-
I mean, the way I'd see it is, why wouldn't you try to advertise to get a sergeant that's an IT person?
Because of what I just said. I'm looking to civilianize the information technology function. So the information technology per diem stipend, you are correct, is $45,000. The sergeant promotion is $4,400. So there is a very big difference. We're taking a senior patrolman and taking him from top step to first step sergeant. We're not adding anybody on addition to the 25. We're taking one of the 25 and backfilling a supervisory role. That's all we're doing. It's just like this board is a certain number. You can choose, you have a chairman and vice chairman. If someone leaves, you replace the member, and you also have to have an election for vice chairman.
But the point is.
But the number doesn't change.
You've already hired a replacement for Gardner.
I've hired the patrolman replacement to keep our sworn staff, not me, the police commission hired the sworn person to keep us whole at 25. So that 25 number has never changed.
All right, so then what'll happen is you've got a patrolman now that's available for more hours, correct?
We will have a patrolman that will eventually get promoted to sergeant. Is that what you're asking?
But the sergeant will be available for more hours because of the fact that the other sergeant,
So,
Gardner, was
Gardner.
working less hours.
So one of the questions
So
that the first...
there's a pickup here.
One of the questions that the first selectman asked me during the Board of Selectmen budget hearing is, if Sergeant Gardner worked 2 shifts a week as a supervisor and his other 3 shifts as information technology, but now you have a full-time person in that 25 slot, what makes things different? My response to him and my same response to you is, it'll assist me greatly when officers use their contractual available sick time. So I will have to use less sick days, go dip into that sick line item less, because I will have personnel available to do that. Understand that that's a moving target. So if that new asset is on a day shift, but the midnight shift guy calls in sick, I can't say to him, go home, come back at 11 and work for straight time. So it's just a constant moving event. But that is where we will benefit. And you'll notice that, when we talk, if we choose to, talk about sick time replacement, we're consistently over in that budget line item because we only budget at 50% of 50%. So that extra help will be greatly needed.
So when you did the extra help, where did you take the money out of the other part of your budget to offset that extra help? I mean, you got extra help, so you shouldn't have to use overtime. Where did you put what other line item lowered?
So-
If you're using overtime,
yeah,
I think that's the question.
Sure.
we should see a reduction there.
No, because we're already budgeting less than what we should be budgeting for sick time replacement. Additionally, you see a savings because Sergeant Gardner was making top step sergeant pay, and we hired someone at first step patrolman pay. And don't forget, we were successful in the last contractual negotiations that we actually added a step, a trainee step. So now we pay someone going to school at the police academy less than we used to. We used to pay them as a full-fledged cop for training. Now we pay them a little bit less for those 26 weeks. So that's where we see our cost savings. 1, less money, we didn't reduce it because we didn't have to add in sick time replacement. And 2, the salary has gone down from top step sergeant to now patrolman trainee level.
So can I take a stab at this? I asked, I think the chief alluded to it in the question I asked him. It was basically, now that you have 25 sworn, if you're separating IT out, and now that you have 25 sworn, before you were backfilling Sergeant Gardner.
Yeah, that's my point.
Right. So, well, hold on. So where potentially do you save not save money, or spend less money
Yeah.
in your budget? And the answer was vacation personnel day coverage, I believe.
Was sick time.
Sick time and vacation.
Sick time and vacation.
Okay, with all, this
Yep, that's fine.
is where I was going with this. So 14, in the actual budget book,
That's what you reduced.
36, page 36 in your budget book. In 13-14, fiscal year 13-14, the vacation personnel day coverage line was budgeted at 26,000 and 99,000 was spent. In the adopted budget for the current fiscal year, the 51,849, and then the chief requested about 80,000 for next year from 51. And the Board of Selectmen increased it to 55,000. Now, look, it's, we threw a number at it, but that was the question I asked the chief. In theory, since you're not backfilling, and therefore maybe someone is not getting extra hours, time and a half, where will you need less money next year? And I don't know if that's where you're going. And that is what I thought from asking the chief a question, the line item was, so.
And that was to the tune of $24,395 that the Board of Selectmen reduced that line item from the request. Police vacation day coverage.
Third line down in the budget on page 36.
I don't think it's that you're gonna save money, but hopefully you're going to not overrun those accounts as high as they might otherwise. But once again, when you start
I
talking
don't
about
like
sick,
going over in any account, but that's,
well, we've been trying to address that over the last several years of getting those, we're only budgeting for, what, 25% of sick time?
50% and 50%, so yeah, 25%.
So, we've been trying over the last several years to increase that line item to get it more in balance, but once again, there's other pressures, and so the numbers get cut or whatever. Plus, when it comes to sick time, how do you know how many people are gonna be sick? How long do you know if you're gonna have someone out for 3 or 4 months who's a senior guy who's got that many days banked, so he's getting paid that whole time? So there's no way to predict that unless, if you can predict that, then I want you to pick some stock for me.
So to sum it up, there's a good chance that you won't either go over your budget like you have other years because of the unknown. And this next year, hopefully you'll stay within line of that budget because you have more flexibility.
I am not saying that we're gonna stay in that
I
budget,
said hopefully.
but hopefully, we can all wish,
You're
but.
picking up the possibility of more time because of Gardner being gone.
So whatever is available because of that would therefore require less use of overtime in vacation and sick time.
And please keep in mind that last year, we came jointly, Finance Director, myself, the First Selectman, with a 2-year plan on how we were gonna start properly funding known liabilities such as vacation time. That's when we started presenting these graphs with you to provide very thorough and detailed explanation of the formulas we use to calculate a line item. We chose to take that in 2 steps. Because of the fiscal state of the town, maybe, John, this goes back to you, we chose not to take the second step this year. So part because maybe we picked up the $24,000 from Sergeant Gardner's retirement, and in part that we didn't feel that we can put it in the budget. Whether it's in the budget or not, it's still a contractual liability. So what I've tried to show you, and certainly I show the commission first, and then the Board of Selectmen, then you folks, what I try to show you is what I know on July 1st of every year, what my liabilities are going to be. I predict replacement at an average of the overtime rate. It might be over, it might be under, I don't know. There are contractual rules on who takes open shifts, depending on when they become available. And I, as an agent in the town, have to follow that contractual agreement, otherwise I get us in a lot of trouble, which can cost us more money. So Brad, I cannot promise I'm gonna stay within budget because I know right now, sitting here, that the number in the book does not meet my known contractual liability on July 1st. we're moving in the right direction.
It's better than it was.
We will see less of an overrun, but at the end of the day, there's going to be an overrun because we're not acknowledging, or maybe we are acknowledging what our liability is, but we're not funding it. And hopefully we get there one day. But until we do, there's going to be overruns, and our history and our budget shows that. So all I can do as the police chief, with less passion than before, all I can do is show you the need based on facts. You folks have to decide what you want to do with that. But sometimes, if you decide to ignore the facts, I can't help that the facts still exist on July 1st. So I give this to you with all certainty that these are the funds I need to safely and efficiently operate the Department of Police Services. It's up to this governmental body to decide that.
Speaking about facts, we used to get performance. What do you judge it? We getting better or worse? You put more police on, we got more coverage, incidents, murders, accidents. What's the mode you use to govern what you do? I mean, you have to have some statistics to drive it, other than it was this year, we're gonna do this year. I mean, what's driving us? Are we getting better as a town, worse as a town, over the last 9 years?
Well, first of all, we haven't added any police officers in.
No. Performance. I'm talking about accidents. I'm talking about, you added your boots on the ground, we went from 20 to 23, then we went to 25. Now we're taking.
Well, at one point we were at 28 or 29.
We're taking a police officer was doing IT work, and putting full person to do full, so you're getting more police work again, because the sergeant's, the IT function's going out. And now we're gonna look at more clerical help, so what's driving us? You gotta ask yourself, what drives us to get more? We just continually wanna grow, and that's what I worry about. Continual growth. I like to look at efficiencies. And, you know, you guys do a great job out there. I have no question that people feel really safe in town. But how safe do we have to be? How far do we have to go? What's driving us? What's the metric that drives more police or less police?
So Barry, I respect your opinion, and every year.
It's not an opinion, that's a question.
Well, I don't know what it was, because it went on for quite some time, with all due respect. But every year you say, how big do we have to get, when is enough, and things of that effect. So let me address just some of those comments on a broad spectrum, if you don't mind. First of all, we haven't added any police officers in the last 3 years. We just haven't. You've lived in town a long time, I've lived in town a long time. I can drive, and everyone here has, I can drive around town, and I know that the town has changed. So, as a police department, we do not just police the residents of the town of Old Saybrook. We police a service population. Everyone who chooses to come to Old Saybrook for whatever reason. Over the past 3 years, we have seen what I consider, as a town resident and your police chief, some significant growth. Please let me finish. There's a reason why a shopping center came to fruition. There's a reason why the DOT is building a 299 space parking lot on North Main Street. There's a reason why we get some economic development grants and new businesses. I get emails weekly on new little businesses that are opening up here and there. There's a reason why people are doing that in Old Saybrook, and it's because there are people here to make those businesses successful. Well, a huge fan of mom and pop style stores. Big box stores that we've seen open recently only open after a significant amount of data appeases boards of directors wherever to say that if we put up a brick and mortar store, we're going to be profitable. Kohl's and Big Y are not just here for the residents of the town of Old Saybrook. We couldn't support their business enough to make it profitable for them to be here. In any other format, at any other meeting, we celebrate growth in the town of Old Saybrook. Until we're discussing the police department budget. I equate the police department budget to a very old-time video game called SimCity. As your city gets bigger, you have to build your infrastructure up. As growth comes into Old Saybrook, we have to make sure that we're properly policing it. You're looking at a police budget that has asked for no increase in personnel. None. Yet we're seeing more things coming into town. Our service population is growing. You ask about metrics. I support metrics, but metrics in law enforcement, you remember as a patrolman, you remember as a sergeant, they're a little bit difficult because no one reports to us that they've chosen not to commit a crime because of a proactive policing effort. We don't have those numbers, nor will we ever be able to capture that. However, I can tell you that the investigations that our professional law enforcement officers are handling have become more detailed and more complex. So the quick accident, which is now a 15-page form, online form mandated by the state of Connecticut, which back in your day was a half a sheet, scribble, hand them a copy, throw a copy in the file. The workload is increasing for the professionals. Maybe the number of accidents hasn't. But I will tell you that the amount of investigations, the detailed investigations, are increasing. It doesn't mean that we have 50 more investigations, but the complexity has increased, which means it takes more personnel time. So I can tell you as the police chief that I see less proactive policing efforts because officers are tied up doing investigative work. My metrics to tell me that is motor vehicle stops, because I require our personnel to work. No one just gets to sit and hang out. That's why I have supervisors on every shift. And quite frankly, our personnel don't do that. But over the last 3 years, I've watched our proactive motor vehicle enforcement steadily decline. And that's because the officers that used to be able to have the time to do that type of enforcement, which is a huge crime deterrent, a huge source of omnipresence for the town of Old Saybrook, they're now spending their time doing investigations. So I don't know if that's a proper metrics, but I can tell you that. There's patrol leaders in this room that can tell you that. Our job has become more complex and therefore more time consuming.
But we should be looking at ways to be more efficient about that. You've also got better equipment, you've got computers, you've got cut and paste, you've got cameras, you've got a lot of things around it, and I'm just looking for, because this is a safe town, you can take credit for that, this is a safe town, but we have to start looking at how do we keep this safe and affordable? And that's what people are concerned with in this town, in case we haven't noticed. People are very concerned about affordability. And, you know, there's some big houses in here, there's a lot of people can afford to live here regardless, but some of us have been here for 40 years and it gets a little more difficult all the time.
So Barry, I don't take credit for the town being safe. I pass that credit on, first of all, to my personnel.
Oh, I meant you as a department, not you personally.
And secondly, to all of us. Because historically, the town of Old Saybrook has got behind the police department and said, this is the level of service we expect, we like what we're getting, and therefore we're going to continue to fund at that level. That's what we see. When you talk about efficiencies, I'm telling you that there's more here in Old Saybrook to police, and we're doing it with the same amount of staff. So while that's not a cut in personnel, it certainly shows efficiencies. Let me also comment on this. Since becoming police chief, and you can ask any member of my leadership team this, we have added an immense amount of efficiencies inside the Department of Police Services. They may not equate to a dollar savings in the budget, but it's certainly an efficiency in the operation. One example I will give you is this, and I used this last year, but I think it's important to demonstrate it as an efficiency. And the treasurer's here and he can back me up on this. When I took over as police chief, our animal control fund was bankrupt, pretty darn close to bankrupt. In a previous administration, animal control was a set position, part-time, X number of hours a week, and there was a person assigned to clean the kennel at overtime, a certain amount of hours a week. When I became police chief, I went in to see the town treasurer and I said, tell me about my accounts. He said, well, the first one I want to talk to you about is your animal control. We changed that program to a per diem program, where we only pay people when we need them to work. That is a huge efficiency. You as a Board of Finance have watched the animal control fund, an off-budget account like it is in every other town, grow and properly fund that segment of the department. Those little things that make a difference are happening all the time.
I'd just like to see quantities, what's going up, by how many. You know, numbers, you can tell me a lot, a little, those numbers don't define anything. What drives you to do more? That's all I'm asking.
We're not doing more, Barry. We're sustaining. So
You're
quite
telling me-
frankly,
You're telling me things are growing in town. How many more stores we have than we had before? Those are the metrics I wanna know. I don't wanna know what's driving you to get more out there.
okay, but
Don't
Barry,
tell me a lot, I hate a lot.
okay,
Doesn't
but
tell me anything.
here's the issue, Barry. I'm your police chief. I am not your economic development person. You're a town resident. You've driven around. Max's place is a significant change. There used to be trees there. Now there's a Big Y, a Kohl's, a Five
I
Guys.
know it's
and a-
there. You don't have to explain. I've been
But
there.
Barry, you're asking me the question, so I do have to explain it. That is a significant amount of traffic in the town of Old Saybrook that generates law enforcement services. I'll tell you an efficiency. We were investigating so many calls, so many thefts from Kohl's, significant high dollar thefts, that I was assigning a police officer to sit in the parking lot to deter that.
That's all I wanna know, the numbers. That's all I wanna know.
But numbers sometimes don't equate, and let me give you an example. If I said to you, we had 10 more accidents than last year, someone on this board might say, wow, 10? And someone might say, 10. 10 doesn't influence my decision on how to police. It's what type of accidents. And those, Barry, are unpredictable. Some years you have fatal accidents, some years you don't. We like to have none. But I have to have the equipment and the personnel and the know-how on how to handle that if it comes along. So the fire that we mentioned in Otter Cove, that Mr. Thorpe mentioned in Otter Cove, that's a significant law enforcement investigation, right? So after the fire was out, and our volunteer fire department does a great job, I'm proud to be a volunteer in our fire department. After they're done, we have an entire investigation that we have to partner with the fire marshal's office. That night, we took 5 or 6 statements. We brought the emergency management truck out. We set it up. People came to the truck. We took statements in there. We printed it out. The state fire marshal got it. Maybe search warrants were involved to go through the rubble and look for it. That's what we do, but I can't tell you how many of those we're going to go to.
I understand that. But you
So
can't-
that's why I have a spending plan.
You can't bid for every situation, and I understand that. But I'm also saying there's trends.
Well, there's
Getting
one
better or
other,
worse?
there's one other trend, and that's what the state of Connecticut and the judges are requiring in terms of information from the police department to go to court and what have you. It's the equivalent of an unfunded mandate to the Board of Ed. How many times have you heard from them? It's an unfunded mandate. Happens all the time to the police department too. The judge orders you have to have this, do that, you know.
I would just like to have a better handle on the numbers. I just think, you know, just to increase, we increase year after year after year. And I know we have to do that. And if guys get salary raises, that's fine.
But that's the increase. But that is the increase, right? So when you say we increase from year to year to year, if I was adding additional patrolmen because of everything I just talked about, I think your statement would be valid. All I'm doing is paying the existing staff their new salaries as per their contract that's negotiated and ratified by the Board of Selectmen.
Which chews up 88% of our budget.
So here's a fun exercise, right? You take the budget, take all the line items in this budget, and figure out which ones we actually have control over. You don't come out with a lot. There is very little flexibility in this budget. I provide the Board of Finance, through the Police Commission, a budget document like no other department head does. I do that because we are the most significant municipal budget, and therefore, I think the way we budget and how we come up with our numbers deserves the transparency that we're giving it. But after you get this book and you spend time with it, and you read it, and we answer the questions the same way we do year after year, I don't know what else to say than this is the cost of running the police department.
So, so I asked the chief a couple questions at the Board of Selectmen meeting, and I said, geez, chief, professional development, educational degrees, I want to reduce some of those line items. I was looking to knock 1,000 off, 2,000, 3, 4, whatever. And a lot of those, and
I understand you can't do anything with them. I understand.
they're contractual.
I understand.
And I didn't, Barry. I mean, and when you talk about line items that you feel there's not a lot of play in, I thought there might be more play in some of these line items, but with the contract that the police officer signed, you know, with a certain amount of time they have, or education they're required to have, they get these bumps. So those are fixed line items. One other comment, I've made it to a lot of you also. We've talked about civilianizing IT. I mean, that's not a new conversation. That is something that was kind of the an idea talked about 2-3 years ago at least.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Maybe more. And this year we're talking about doing it. So, and I get the argument, I get the conversation that Sergeant Gardner was IT, now he's not, so you have an extra person. I understand.
Half extra.
I understand that conversation. But when you remove IT out of this budget, so if you were to put IT in the town hall budget, perhaps something Chief and I can work out, it's a 3.5% budget. And, you know, that's the number I came up with.
What do you look at for $45,000? What do you look at for a part-time IT guy? How often does he work? How often is he there?
Well, yeah, let me just say this. Larry Hayden's about 45 right now. He will be 45,000.
49,
Yeah,
for 30.
so, let's
For
just
30
say,
hours.
so town IT is going to be at about 95,000, 90 to 95,000 proposed, which I think that, if you do apples to apples, in many other towns, you're going to find that's incredibly good.
And that's without
I would
benefits,
submit
right?
that.
Larry
From
doesn't
a
get
town
benefits.
IT plan.
And Sergeant Gardner does.
If you were to combine them and just say, here's the number, I think, in fact, I can get you, CCM does a salary survey. And if you were to look at IT, I mean, it's all over the map.
Is that
again.
possible? 'Cause
Yeah,
at one point we were talking about, had to be a cop into the IT function, Gardner was there. Now, is that possible?
To do what?
When you had Gardner in there, it would have to be a police officer doing the IT function, because it was different. So now we're talking about combining in town. Is that doable? Is that the same?
So, first of all, let me say this, and I'm not saying this to be argumentative. When anyone on this board refers to my personnel, they either have ranks or names. We don't go around saying O'Neill, Thorpe, O'Brien. I think it's disrespectful. I really do. So, Sergeant Gardner,
I didn't mean to disrespect.
I understand, nor did I, and we had that conversation, but I think if we're doing a check and balance, we all should do a check and balance. So, Sergeant Gardner, we tried several years ago to civilianize information technology. We did. The primary goal of any information technology program, whether it's in the police budget or not in the police budget, needs to be operationally sound for us. Meaning that in a 24/7 operation, if we have a system that goes down that's critical to our operation at 2 o'clock in the morning, I need an information technology person to respond. Our information technology that we have, and maybe a great workshop, because we did do it for the police commission, maybe a great workshop for the Board of Finance, is a complete overview of the Department of Police Services information technology program. I think you'd be shocked what it entails. But we need the person that specializes in our equipment. From the first Wang computer that was installed back when, I don't know if you were there. Were you there when they computerized? Richie Powers, right? A friend of yours and mine, was a patrolman who was assigned to be the information technology person. That has been that way ever since. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to say information technology doesn't have to be a sworn law enforcement officer. Sworn law enforcement officers have a job to do, and it's not necessarily rebuilding a database or virtualizing a SQL Server issue. That should not be their job. So I'm saying let's civilianize. The first year we do that, it's going to look like we have some duplicity. But after that, it's going to make sense. In efficiency, Barry, The civilian that directs traffic at Goodwin School, our dancing traffic cop, Officer Schneider. Instead of having a sworn law enforcement officer tied up for 45 minutes every day doing traffic at the Goodwin School, I have them going to calls for service that they're needed at, and I'm paying someone $15.40 to direct traffic. Those are the types of efficiencies I want to do. Now blow that up, this IT position is that. So if the first selectman says, hey, let's make a town-wide information technology department, here's what I say to him. Great, but here's my deal. As police chief, when I call and say I have a critical system down, that person or persons needs to come running, and it needs to get fixed. 2, because we are a mission-critical agency with information technology, we can't be put on the back burner. Our email's down, it means we're not getting something important from the state.
All I asked if it was doable. I didn't need the full explanation. I think I've heard that 3 or 4 times. We know how it goes.
You asked a question, and I would be negligent if I didn't give you the full explanation.
Go ahead.
I have a question for Commissioner Finch here. Who is the liaison from the police commission to the Board of Finance?
Brad and Rick.
No, from the police commission to the Board of Finance.
We don't have a liaison the opposite direction.
Can you tell me what the function of each police commissioner is, and do they have a specialization, or do they have a specific area they work with the police department to oversee?
Well, we have a chairman, we have a vice chairman, we have a secretary. Our problem is if we meet, there's very strict rules as to when we meet and whether those meetings are considered legal or not. We have a very difficult time communicating outside of our meetings without running. We've asked the town attorney about this, and if we have, I can't remember the exact numbers, I have to look it up, but I think it's more than 3 of us at any one spot at any one time. It's considered a meeting, has to be noticed, has to be blah, blah. So it's very difficult for us to work as a group or even a subgroup without running into lots of issues and problems with Hartford.
One commissioner can go to the police department and review situations with the chief, or one police commissioner can come to the police department and if there's some sort of questions or bills like they used to review and or approve.
I believe Commissioner Sparrow still reviews and approves of any bills after the chief and or his executive assistant has approved it. Commissioner Sparrow, as he's done for I don't know how many years, goes through those bills, approves them before they're sent to town hall.
And Commissioner Dunlap or Commissioner Savino have any
Commissioner Savino's vice chairman.
Yeah.
But in terms of day-to-day operations, there's not a lot of communication from commission members. I talk to the chief several times a week usually. And then we bring forward to our meetings anything that is pertinent. We don't go through every incident and names of people that got arrested and that kind of stuff. I'm not sure how that is, I leave it up to the chief as to if someone has questions about things like that, whether or not it's appropriate for that to be released or not. Because I'm not that familiar with what's allowed to be released, what's not. If it's inside an investigation, obviously that can't be compromised. I mean, there's things that I've asked him, and he said that, sorry, sir, but I can't talk to you about that.
I think there's a misconception out there of what a police commissioner does, and I think maybe it's because of the show The Commish. I don't know. But the commission...
Blue Bloods.
Right. And there was that show Commish, he liked the Italian grinders. The commission only has authority when they're meeting as a group that's been properly noticed. So a commissioner doesn't walk into the Department of Police Services and ask operational level questions that wouldn't be proper. No commissioner has tried to do that. There's never been an issue. I think they all certainly know what they do as an elected official. but they don't get involved in the operation. If there was an attempt to do that, I obviously would have a conversation with the chairman, because that's just not proper. So a commissioner is not privy to investigations any more than any other member of the public is. They can't come in and review things. They don't get involved in disciplinary matters unless it rises to their level. And that's so that, because they're the adjudicating body. So an average suspension of an officer or a letter of reprimand gets reported to the commission as part of our rules and regulations, or our general orders, excuse me. But they don't get details about it, because if that turns into a grievance, they're a step in the grievance process. If I recommend discipline above what I can issue, that I'm authorized to issue as the police chief, they have to make the decision. So there's a very fine yet distinct line. But there are certainly those who think that a police commissioner has operational level authority and can direct or command the troops. That's not the way it is anywhere in the state of Connecticut.
None of the commissioners, even myself as the chairman, has the ability to tell the chief, I want this done or that done, or we got, he and I may talk about a situation, but ultimately, the operations of the police department is the responsibility of the chief. I'm very well aware of my role in that. At least I don't think I've ever stepped over that line. But the police commissioners in town have much less authority over the police department than most people understand and recognize, and that's by state statute and our charter.
So
We're basically we're an elected body, the same as you all are.
So basically, Commissioner Spargo is the only one that comes to the police department to help review or keep.
But his only
the commission
function is
up
to review
date.
bills. It's not like when he's there, he's rummaging
No,
through arrest
but
records.
He's
or-
the only commissioner that you're reporting to me that goes to the police department to help routinely keep the commission informed by reviewing operating or bills that, or potential bills that come in.
So the long-standing tradition that was inherited, and I think Mr. Arnell alluded to maybe possibly 40 years he's been doing this. 45 years. Was that he was part of the check and balance system of bills. However, times have changed. So for an invoice, and let's just kind of think about this. So there's an operating budget that's approved by the citizens, line items. I, as the police chief, am authorized by the police commission to administer our operating budget. So I make decisions on a day-to-day basis on expenditures. We're going to buy a box of pencils. Buy it. They buy it, an invoice is generated, it comes to me. I review it. Staff prepares a check request, make sure it's coming out of the right account. I sign it. Commissioner Sparrow goes through and verifies it. But at that point, he can't say, return the box of pencils. Because I've made the operational level decision well within the confines of our operating budget that was approved by the town citizens, underneath my authority given to me by the police commission to make expenditures. That check request then travels to town hall, where it's reviewed by accounting and signed off by the first selectman before a check is even generated.
And reviewed by the finance.
And reviewed by the finance director. So when you talk about check and balances, remember that old conjunction junction, how a bill becomes a law? Before we write a check, in some cases, it's reviewed by a lower level supervisor that's in charge of a budgetary operation, signed off by me, signed off by a police commissioner, signed off by accounting, signed off by the finance director, signed off by the first selectman, to then generate a check. Folks, that's a lot of steps.
We do on a monthly basis
And I was gonna add that, thank you.
get budgetary information about every single line item, how much was appropriated in that line item, how much has been spent, what percentage that is. And all the commissioners look that over at our meetings. If there's something that's, 3 months into the year and it's got a 75 or 80% usage already spent, obviously that generates a question to the chief. How come? Well, it was a prepaid contract or something, and so therefore the vast majority of that line item is is paid, but we don't anticipate having to do that later in the budget year. So we do go over the budget at every single one of our meetings, not on an individual box of pencils level, but on a line item level.
Understood that. And to participate in the townwide purchasing orders for like paper products and things that we've talked about at different meetings about, so that between the Park and Rec, the Town Hall, the Board of Education, we all buy a truckload of paper towels or other type of paper products.
Primarily copy paper.
Copy paper at this point.
Copy paper, okay. And then there's been some discussion about overtime, backfilling, special extra personnel, and et cetera. Is backfilling, extra personnel, and overtime all dollars amount, is that correct?
I believe so, if I'm understanding your
Yeah, I
question.
mean, so overtime and backfilling and extra personnel.
Right.
It's just
But overtime might
where they're
be,
applied.
it might be various different things. If there's a bank robbery and it's, you need extra people on to investigate, or a bad accident, and you need to bring in another officer, there may be overtime that may not necessarily be a backfill.
And if I could just add, sorry, if you don't mind, if you looked in our detailed budget book on page 6, what we do is we give you a description of how we use each line item. So going back to a question that was asked maybe a little bit over an hour ago, if we were comparing, different towns, there are many communities that don't break out their overtime funds into all the different categories that we do. In a lot of communities, it's one lump sum.
Overtime.
What we do in Old Saybrook is we're tracking how we're using those extra dollars. And we're putting a definition to that line item. So if I assign on our payroll sheet, and I brought an example of what our payroll looks like if anyone wants to see that. When I assign someone, extra hours in the category of overtime, it has to meet this definition. Or if I assign someone extra personnel time, it has to meet this definition. So this book that we give you, that we give to the commission, we give to the Board of Selectmen, and we give to you, is not only a budget document, but literally our guide throughout the year on how we assign expenditures. So you can go through our timesheets, and I can see that Sergeant Walsh worked an extra 8 hours for this week. And I look at the schedule and I say, why did he do that? Oh, he did that because another sergeant called in sick. So that 8-hour liability gets assigned to the sick time line item. Or the schedule, all the rotations, something doesn't fit. We have a day where there's no sergeant scheduled because we haven't replaced that section yet. But I needed a sergeant. He got assigned overtime. That would come out of the extra personnel line item. So you'll see years when you look in the past, and we've had a lot of conversations about actuals. My actuals change because if I have a mid-year retirement, I have a cop leave, I won't confuse it with rank, I have a regular patrolman leave, I backfill that spot. My only budgetary line item that I have available to me is extra personnel. Because the salary line item only pays for a salary. I don't have a salary, I'm backfilling. Now I hire a new cop, I use that salary money to send someone to the police academy. At the end of the year, I might be in the black in salary, because he could have been a top step guy that was replaced by a bottom step guy, but be completely in the red on extra personnel. And my explanation is, I had to backfill the guy who left, and I used less salary to hire a new person. So it's constantly in flux, but the best thing I can do for the commission, and for you, and for the townspeople, is stick to these definitions, because if I'm questioned on 1 hour of personnel time, it has to fit in one of these spots, and it's got to make sense. I can't give someone credit in a sick and injured line item if they weren't backfilling someone who wasn't sick and injured. So our checks and balances, Barry, efficiencies that have been added, are, I believe, ironclad.
Plus, I think there's something that you may not understand is that, at least as long as I've been on the police commission, I don't think we've been up to 25 sworn officers on the road, in the building, et cetera, all at once. There's always been somebody that has retired, and we've hired somebody new. They're at the police academy. Are they on the payroll? Yes, they're on the payroll, but they're not an officer on the street. They're not an officer on the street till they get done with the police academy. Then they have about, 10, 12 weeks of field training. So they're at least, 6 months usually, from the time they're, start the police academy till the time they're, okay, here's your cruiser, you cover Sector A.
So to add credibility to that statement, I can tell you with all certainty, since October 21st, 2009, there has not been a day since that moment where we have had 25 full-time police officers all ready to go to work due to retirements, injury, or illness. Has not happened yet.
So where are you now then?
So now I'm down because I have a person who's graduating from the police academy this week. So then he'll enter his 10 weeks of FTO.
So who then on this list is he replacing?
He replaced Sergeant Gardner.
But then,
He's on that list.
He's on the
just in
list.
cabinet.
what's his name?
Sarah, Patrolman
Okay, so
Sarah.
it's Sarah.
But that's a whole nother thing that everybody says, gee, you have 25 police officers. There's never been, well, since whatever year you said, a time where every single officer was available to do the job.
So I've been doing the work schedule for the department for 10 years now. It was one of the assignments I had under Chief Mosca's administration, and I continue to do it because the schedule drives the budget. I'm responsible for the budget, so I directly do the work schedule. I can tell you that it's not an easy task, and I don't say that for you folks to say, oh, great job. When you're doing the work schedule, you're literally saying to human beings when you can be with your family and when you can't. So the work schedule is the budget, is the contract, and is human beings' needs. You have to balance all three of those things and then make sure that you have a proper deployment of personnel to manage the town's public safety needs. And that happens every day.
I have two more questions before anybody else gets in here.
Okay?
You got a $31,000 line item for phone service. Now, Larry Hayden has been doing all the phones in town here. Carl says he saved a significant amount of money going forward.
Well, no, we're getting brand new phone service with a lot more functionality at almost exactly the same price.
Same price, okay.
Yeah.
But you're gonna have new technology in the new police department. And that's
Still need phones.
been shopped out to get the best rate and everything?
I believe so.
It is. So if you notice, if you read our description of phone service on page 17, you notice that there's no dollars being requested to increase that line item. So the $31,000 that we use to pay for phone service and everything in this description is the same $31,000 that we're asking for today. So if your phone bill went up at home, if your cellular phone bill went up at home, or your regular home service, if you still have it, went up at home, the Department of Police Service is requesting no additional monies for the next fiscal year to provide the same level of service. The phone system, as part of the construction budget, is a new phone system, but that's not in our budget. That's not part of that line item.
But plus, I don't know, how many cell phones are there?
So all of our sworn personnel have smartphones issued to them. And it's been that way for many years.
So not only are we talking about landlines in the building, we're talking about
Cell phones.
cell phones for every sworn officer.
Right.
My last and final question is, describe to me how you currently get gasoline for your cars, and are you using fob devices, and what kind of traction on the fob devices do you be able to track with that
I'd like to take
information?
this.
Yeah,
So here's the good news. I don't know if you noticed, we're building a new facility. So with the new facility comes a new fueling depot, which will be all key fob based. I can't speak intelligently to it, the process yet, because The construction company has not been able to speak intelligently to us about that yet, because they're waiting to learn about it from their subcontractors. So this current year, we will have an overrun in our fuel line item because, as everyone here knows, we're currently renting a fuel tank. So in addition to the normal gas that we've budgeted for, we are also paying out of our gasoline line item, which we did not plan for, the rental of a gasoline tank. And in that transition, there was some fuel lost. There was some bad fuel. We tried to take as much as we could from 225 Main Street and put it in the new tank. They sucked the tank down too much, put bad stuff in that tank, which then started going into the cars, which we said time out, had companies look, see if we could save the gas. It turned out we had to make the decision to pump some of that gas out. So we lost about 1,000 gallons of fuel in the transition from 225 Main Street to temporary tank. Starting with this budget year, we'll be in a new facility, and our accountability for gas usage will be enhanced just by the nature of the technology that's going in the fueling depot with the new building.
So what's that technology supposed to do?
Well, I don't know. And John can tell you this from being on the building committee, right? So sometimes the details are not explained to us. However, it's a gasoline tank. There's going to be a fob. So you're going to have to fob in. So we'll know the person fueling, and we'll know the vehicle it's going into.
Will you know the mileage of the vehicle it's going into?
So every shift, anyone assigned a department vehicle has to do a vehicle inspection. That's documented. Part of that documentation is the mileage in and mileage out. I'm sure you guys did the same thing. You had car sheets, right?
Actually punch in your mileage with the key fob there, so that you can track it electronically. You don't have to manually record it.
So I don't know if that's the system that's being bought. So with many of the systems, and again, I look for John's support, Lisa and Carl, with many of the systems going into the new building, the nitty-gritty of them was never discussed with us. Because we entered into a design build, we hired people who know about this stuff, that have spec'd it and they're installing it, and we are all waiting to learn about it.
So
Is that a fair statement, John?
currently, there's no fob.
At that is a rudimentary temporary tank that would be found on a farm that we, through the talents of our Director of Public Works, Fire Chief Dunn, and myself, were able to get installed. Don't forget, we had to go to the zoning commission and get approval. So that was, I don't want to use the term jury-rigged, because it's not. It's in accordance with all the laws.
Temporary.
But it was a very temporary system. Our fuel is logged at that, just as it was for probably your careers and mine at 225 Main Street, where you fill the gas up and you write down how many gallons you put in, which is check and balance to how many gallons get delivered, right? So a gasoline truck comes to deliver gasoline, and we know how many gallons get dumped, and we know how many gallons are being used. They best mesh up pretty close, or we have a problem, and we don't.
Any other questions?
I just told him I'd give him 2, there's lots more, but 2 is enough.
If there's more, with all due respect, while members of the commission are here and we're on the agenda, I would love to entertain any of your questions tonight, because it's important for us to answer those questions and not have them discussed when we're not on the agenda and we don't know to be here to be able to give some factual response. So if you have more questions, Sarge, with all due respect, please ask them.
Where's your first responder medical equipment purchased?
So from a variety of places. Our primary supplier is Common Sense EMS Supply, because they provide us with the best possible pricing. But we certainly do go out to the market and see where things are cheapest. And Mr. Dunn has always been able to provide the town of Old Saybrook a significant discount on our first responder medical supplies.
What are the costs detailed for the collect system maintenance?
So the collect system is just one of the communication systems that we have. And our description, which is listed on page 23. So this is $4,000 that supports that server and supports any of the information technology that goes along with that. So maintenance, any licensing agreements that we have to use, and any repairs that we have to make throughout the fiscal year.
You still billed on a per use basis,
No.
just flat fee now?
Flat fee, and in fact, the backbone of the system has probably changed from when you were on the job. There's a new system called the Public Safety Data Network, which is a very robust, I think it's 8 fiber ring system, a redundant system that's around the state. That's actually what the new 911 system is either gonna run on. So there's a very advanced fiber network dedicated specifically to public safety use in the state of Connecticut now.
I see we have telephone system support, and did you mention that when I asked about the other 31,000?
So the 31,000 is to pay our phone bills.
Okay.
The telephone system support is to have a support contract. So with this, if you don't mind if I go a little bit broad on this question, the chairman alluded in his opening that a lot of the maintenance for the new building is kind of an unknown. Building committee members that are represented here tonight know that we had our architect, at the request of the finance director and the first selectman, bring some estimates forth. A lot of people look at this and go, this should be 0 because you get a year warranty. You're right, except the 0 thing, because I'm moving in April. So April to April is my 1 year. Our fiscal year obviously runs to June 30th. So I need something to sign on a maintenance agreement from April to June 30th. I don't know what those are yet, because again, we have not yet been presented with our master book of all the systems and all the providers and what they've spec'd out if we choose to hire them to do continuing maintenance on the system that they just installed. I just don't know that.
So that may fluctuate.
So it's a placeholder for now?
Kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term.
It's the best budget estimate that we can provide at this time. But Carl will tell you, Lisa will tell you, I went in to see them with all these line items and I said, what do you want me to do? Because there's no sense in me recommending it to the commission if you at the Board of Selectmen level are gonna have a completely different opinion. So when these numbers went in front of my police commission, they went with the knowledge of Carl and Lisa, based on the knowledge that we got from the architect. It's literally the best estimate we can provide. You can change those numbers, we don't know what they'll be.
This would be a good spot to
Sure.
talk about copiers. If you notice, there is not a line item in the police budget for copiers. Historically, there has not been for the past several years, because it's under the town hall budget for one copier. Obviously, two, but
Yeah.
one actually fell off and is so old, it's no longer on a maintenance agreement. So obviously, will have different needs at the new facility. And it wasn't until between my schedule and the chief's schedule that we actually met with our current, who's currently doing our copier leases. And we were quoted a price, so we're gonna have to ask for some, right now, ballpark, $7,500 for maintenance of 3 copiers for the new facility, but the chief is shopping around to see if we can do better than that. But we knew we were gonna have to come up with a number for that, but in the scheme of things with construction, now we're getting to the level of those kind of things, so.
And the 7,500 is not all new money, because whatever was in the town hall budget for
Right.
our 1.5, I'll call it,
$200 a month, yeah.
that'll be transferred over at some point, however that works in their world.
Can't you prorate April through the end of June on all those contracts?
I could, John, if I knew what they were. So we haven't, so let me put it this way, because no system has been approved yet by the architect, we have not yet been able to engage those subcontractors to say, how much would a year maintenance contract be? So because none of those conversations have happened, because they haven't been allowed to happen, quite frankly, there might be some building systems that we decide as a town that the people installing them might not be the same people we want to be maintaining them.
Yeah, I could see that.
But I need to wait, for the architect. So the architect only started his first punch list last Friday. I gotta wait to hear from him on systems, and I couldn't even tell you how many systems need a maintenance program. So this will be the first building ever that's ever had a sprinkler system. Luckily for us, the way we bundle things in town, fire suppression systems are in the fire marshal's budget. But I bet he's gonna have to add money because he's gonna have another building to handle a fire system in. We've never had real modern day correctional facilities ourselves. So those maintenance agreements, I don't know if that's once every 5 years. I don't know if it's once every 10 years. As you know, we're still trying to get them to fix some of the stuff that we think is broken. So we haven't had any of the conversations with them about this. So these are the best budgetary estimates we can give.
On your cars, which two are the ones that the canine units use?
Car 8 and car 9.
Another question I have for you was, last year we had a part-time executive secretary,
Yes.
and he worked, I believe, about 25 hours a week
That's correct.
for about 27,000. And I see this new person you hired, I would assume is gonna work 40 hours,
She's currently working 40 hours, correct.
and it's to the cost of the town of, hold on, it's the cost of the town of $84,500. I just thought, why wouldn't you have considered getting another 25-hour person, have 50 hours? You could have both people work 3 days a week, which would give you 6 days' work, and it would save the town approximately $32,000.
So,
The part-time person did not have benefits, and I believe that new number you,
Right, but I'm looking at efficiency of the town. If you hired another person to replace Trent, and then hire another person for the same amount of hours, you're getting 50 hours for about 54,000. Right now, you're getting 40 hours for 84,005. Just to me is not good,
so
good management.
well, you're talking about an agency that has an excess of 50 employees, full and part-time. And that does not seem unreasonable to me that agency should have a full-time secretary or administrative assistant. You can put it, I don't know what title for.
But you're gonna end up with, as an example, you could have.
I understand what you're saying, but there's also certain continuity of somebody being there and all the time. I mean, my business, I'm a pharmacist. They don't staff stores with 6 part-time pharmacists. They staff the store with 2 full-time pharmacists that work opposite each other, so that you have continuity, you know what's going on, you get the people
Well,
get.
the other way, I mean, we do job shares with the teachers. So that, say if, we'll call them A and B. So A works Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, B works Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If A can't show up on Tuesday, B could show up. They can do back and forth. So to me, you get a lot more efficiency, never mind you're saving the town about $34,000.
So, Brad, I appreciate where you're going with it.
And it's just a thought process, that's all.
I understand. So if you just listen to mine. So I'm responsible for the police operation. A police chief all across the state of Connecticut normally has a full-time assistant. Talk about job sharing in the school. And I don't like to compare us to the school, but I'll say this. A secretary at Goodwin School took a vacation for 2 or 3 weeks and was backfilled. The second secretary was backfilled with a sub. What the Department of Police Services is doing with the approval of the commission is we have 1 full-time clerical person for the entire operation. That is not unreasonable. If you look around just the municipal departments, you will find a significant amount of our department heads whose agencies are open for 40 hours a week and have no other staff in their office other than them that have full-time clerical support. Quite frankly,
You would have that.
quite frankly, it's an important position. Things get lost. I am but one person. And to do my job properly for the town of Old Saybrook, I need clerical support, someone at an executive level that has an executive skill set that has continuity of the operation. It's very important. Now, everyone on this Board of Finance knows that we actually sought out 2 full-time clerical positions, an executive assistant and a full-time records position. The full-time records position was reduced to a part-time position by the Board of Selectmen. When you take a look at the town hall, you have to understand that the Office of the Chief of Police and the Records Division are 2 different things. I equate them to the First Selectman's office and the town clerk. 2 completely different skill sets, 2 completely different knowledge bases. That's important for our operation. We understand that the First Selectman made the reduction. That's, for the commission to just discuss at some point. But having a full-time executive assistant, for me, is necessary for me to meet my professional obligations to the town.
Plus, it doesn't, in my personal opinion, and I'm not speaking for the whole commission, but I'm speaking for myself. The chief gets paid a certain level of money. Does it make sense for him to be doing secretarial work or executive assistant work that you can have somebody being paid significantly less money per year doing that so that the chief can do what a chief is supposed to do?
I don't think anybody's suggesting that.
Well, I think there's a certain continuity that you can't just plug people in and unplug people. Then you have to train 2 different people. One's not gonna know what the other one's doing. I think that, personally, I don't think that would work well.
One last question I have is, why you haven't considered this, but Madison's hired 10 patrolmen that are either former state police or former Coast Guard. So they got 10 officers now that do not need health insurance, which saves the town about $250,000. The training is, I believe, greatly reduced. And I just don't know why we're not considering doing something like that.
To the best of my knowledge, when we have had openings, we have not had anyone of that background apply.
Right, so, Brad, a couple things at that point.
Because I've asked the chief the same question, but if you have a position available, you do your due diligence, you advertise, you do whatever you do to get a pool of people to start with. And the last officer, I think, what was the pool, 100 people?
100 plus people.
100 plus people showed the initial interest. And it came down to 3 people that came before the police commission, and we chose one of them. None of those people were retired state officers. I mean, it just, for whatever reason, that's what, at that particular point in time, there weren't people with that skill set applying for that job.
And Brad, if I could just add to that. So in addition to, they have to apply, right? So we recruit, we go to college fairs, we advertise on every social media site, known to man when we have a hiring, we put it in the paper. Those people that you're talking about have to take the initiative to apply. They then have to pass all the state mandated pieces of the hiring process. And if they do, they have to be selected by the commission. But let me just say this, while I would never discourage anyone from applying, I would think one of the things that the commission would contemplate when hiring an officer is, when you hire someone who has completed their law enforcement career, and now they're looking to start another law enforcement career, you must, and we would do this internally, and then the commission would do this, you must look at that person as a whole. So if they had a knee injury at year 5 and they retired at year 20, the new agency now owns that knee. If they were, and Commissioner Sabino here, correct me if I'm wrong, state police officers are not eligible for heart and hypertension under the statute, right?
Correct.
But if a municipality hires a retired state police officer, they then become eligible. You own that 20, 25-year career. So when you make those decisions, it sounds great, but there's a lot. Brad, you're shaking your head. With all due respect, I'm giving you factual answers.
I know, you said enough, I'm all set.
Okay.
One more
Well,
question.
one other quick comment about that is that they have to also be able to pass the current physical fitness test, which if you get someone that's got 20, 30 years in, they may or may not be able to pass that physical fitness test the same as a 20, 22, 23-year-old, recruit. I know I wouldn't want to have to take it.
Question, on the extra personnel line item, represents funding required to maintain a control division work schedule. That seems inherent in job function, but how many hours do you actually use in the year for special functions? You outlined Memorial Day and 4th of July, not Memorial Day, but 4th of July, I'm assuming Memorial Day parade and the Christmas. So I'm just kind of curious.
Torchlight.
Yeah.
Torchlight parade, there you go. So I don't have the exact hours in front of me. We can certainly try to go back in the records and do that. Now that I have clerical support, we can do all sorts of neat stuff. And we'll be doing that going forward. So if you're looking for like a cost center analysis of, hey, for the Torchlight parade, how many man hours at what cost, we're gonna be doing all that going forward. But it all does come out of this account, the extra personnel account.
Because I guess this is one account that, and we talked about last year, switching over to the selectmen, since the selectmen has the special.
If the selectmen's willing to take any portion of our financial obligation, we'd be happy to give it up.
Congratulations, Carl.
But there's more than just events in that line item.
Exactly,
So it
thank
wouldn't be
you.
the entire line item.
Well, that's
that
why I'm
we're
asking.
transfer over.
Her breakdown.
Yeah, is it 25,000 that we need to break out and say, this is for the special events of the town?
Which page are we on, please?
Page 6. So let me ask you the question I ask each year, right? So when you and I pay our tax bill, we don't pay a tax bill for the police department, a tax bill for the selectman's office. The mill rate would not change if the same dollar amount came out of the police budget and went into the selectman's budget. We have conversation around this table about true cost transparency. If we're hiring a cop for the Torchlight parade, it should come out of the police budget. If it comes out of the selectmen's budget, it lowers the police budget, makes my percentages look better, but at the end of the day, I'm doing a check request to an account run by the first selectman to say, you gotta pay this cop this Friday, because contractually, he or she is due their money. So, to me, I don't wanna use the word shell game, because it has a negative connotation, but we're moving the same dollar amounts around. I don't know what that accomplishes, except more paperwork for me and Carl and Lisa.
Well, for one reason, it puts, it's a special assignment, that the selectman has these events under his budget. I guess I'd like to see that being reflected in his budget, that's a cost center.
Yeah, but if we were to do that, we'd also have, because the public works does things for the parades and events. So it wouldn't just be the police, we'd have to look at every. But if you want to make it to see how much we're spending as a town on the Torchlight Parade, then it would need to be inclusive of
So if we have line
everything
item
that
for
we
special,
spend.
extra personnel for special events.
It's not.
Is there a line item in Public Works that says special events?
But he's got more in there than events.
Correct.
That's what I'm
So-
saying, we break out some of it.
But so has Larry got items that have events and other things mixed in, so. My point as an accountant is, if you're going to call it a cost center, it needs to be all inclusive, not just things that are maybe easier to extract than others.
So this is where my detailed explanation sometimes causes issues, right? So when municipalities, municipal police departments say that overtime is $300,000, it's an easier discussion to have than discussing the finites of each little function. But again, this is true transparency in how I'm coming up with the formulated budget. I could do it the other way. It'd be much easier, and my year-to-year actuals would look much better. But this is true transparency on how we actually do the formulas to come up with the dollar.
Page 8, Your sick injured replacement, I'm sure we had a conversation about this last year. It went from the year prior, we had budgeted $11,000 to last year was $25,000, and now this year is $29,000.
Correct.
Why the sudden jump?
So last year, Lisa and I came to the Board of Finance and we said that this is one of the line items historically that's been drastically underfunded. So we came up with a way to fund it. So we decided to fund 50% of known sick liability that one would earn in a fiscal year of just the police officers that did provided direct service, the ones that have to be backfilled. And I use the example of, in school, if your homeroom teacher's out, you need a substitute, but if the guidance counselor's out for a day, not a big deal. So the guidance counselor's the detective, they're out for a day, it's not the end of the world, but the patrolman working the patrol sector's out, needs to be backfilled. So last year was the big jump. The only jump you see this year is the new rates of pay based on the contract. So the median overtime went up because of a contractual raise. That's the only change you see there. And Brett, if you don't mind, just one step further, if you go to page 9, and you take a look at the third column, so at the time of publication, the bargaining unit, just those in yellow, I believe, had 1,075 days available to them. We do not budget for that.
How many were used last year?
I don't have that number, but I can get you that number, but a significant amount. So the last couple of years, we have been plagued, and I use that word honestly, we've been plagued with some serious either illnesses or injuries that have taken some of our valued employees out of the operation for 3 or 4 months at a time.
Well, dollar-wise, at the end of February, budget for that line item was $25,394, spent $59,803, because you had a patrolman out for a significant amount of time this year.
Why are some highlighted and some not?
So the ones that are highlighted are the ones that perform that direct service delivery, the homeroom teacher version. So those are the only ones that we use in the formula to come up with the amount.
Special assignment, the selectmen have reduced it.
They reduced it by $1,969.
But what does that really, I guess I feel like I'm seeing, and maybe it's because it's all broken out, but I feel like we're seeing, okay, 20,000 for the special assignment, okay, now we've got another, the overtime, and then another 57,000 for,
Page 6, extra patrol, extra personnel.
right, it's just.
So maybe I'm not explaining it well.
There's some redundancy of
There
what's really being in this cost, is it?
There is definitely no redundancy. So each one of these line items has a very detailed description on what we use it for. We stay true to those descriptions all year long. So special assignment is different than overtime. Overtime is different than sick replacement. Sick replacement is different than extra personnel. These are all very defined categories. So in our payroll sheet each week, each one of these categories is listed for each person. If you're assigned extra hours and sick time, it's because you backfilled someone who was sick.
But like, so what's special, what is so unique about special assignment? Because.
It doesn't fit into any other category. So let me explain. So on page 11, it says, these monies are reserved for officers who are assigned to perform duties in addition to their scheduled workday based on an assignment or skill. The department seeks no increase in the number of shifts currently budgeted.
Like what though? I mean.
So I'll give you a perfect example. So Sergeant Walsh is a patrol sergeant who used to teach DARE at the St. John's School. We have no personnel assets to continue that program there. He has a special skill set. He's been assigned to go there for an hour a week to do that. If it's not on his regular shift, he gets compensated from that account. If there's another police officer who is a special skill or talent, that is needed to do something that doesn't fit in any other category, it comes out of this special assignment category. Right now, we are preparing to move into a new building. We're going from our makeshift rental to a new facility. There's a lot of policies and procedures that have to be written. How do you flow evidence? How does a prisoner flow? Where do they get picked up? How do you enter the building? Where do you park? All those things have to be done. I don't have sworn staff that has to write those general orders hanging around. So they have a special skill set and they have a special assignment that will have a beginning and an end, but the only way to fund that is out of this line item. So all throughout the fiscal year, things come up that I have to take, and I think Sergeant Stevenson has asked year after year for a master town list of everyone's certification and everything, right? You've asked for that. So inside the Department of Police Services, I know who's certified or talented or skilled in a specific area, and if I need them to do something, and it's above their 8-hour workday, I need a source of funding to pay them. This is that source. But it's not overtime, it's not sick replacement, it's not,
And it can't be done during the workday.
it can't because there's no continuity. So I can't say to a sergeant, write me this policy, go to the medical, supervise the fraud investigation, cover this because your patrolman stuff. It doesn't
Not
work.
anyone just doing clerical work? I mean, like Gardner was your IT person.
Sergeant Gardner was the IT person, and no, we don't just have patrolmen or sergeants just hanging out, not doing anything.
I'm not saying not doing anything, but a management of time.
No, they have assigned duties that they have to do. So with all due respect, right, so my profession is running the police department. I'm giving you the best answers I possibly can based on my education, my experience, and my tenure as your police chief. If you don't feel that I'm giving you the right stuff, please clarify what you're asking because I'm telling you how it works. If you have a better mousetrap, tell me what you're thinking.
Well, I guess when you use the example of a policy and procedure, that's sitting down and writing and saying, okay, here's half an hour.
Oh, it's much more than a half an
Well,
hour.
I know it's much more than half an hour, but I also know it's not a sort of an above and beyond type of thing. I mean, I feel like you've put a box into, this is exactly what this person can do and that's all they can do. Instead of with Sergeant Gardner, we used him for IT.
So,
You expanded that box for his role.
so, Breck, with all due respect, our officers are very talented and they can multitask very well. But when someone's given an assignment, they need time to do that assignment. And I promise you that no one gets to go in their office from me on down with a plan of doing something during the day, and that plan isn't changed during the day, by me or by circumstance. So we're multitasking, we're using our personnel assets as best we can. You say half an hour, I say it's not a half an hour, you say, I know it's not a half an hour.
Oh, I
But let's not generalize in front of the camera or in the public. It takes time to do these things. So when we write a new general order, you have to research it and make sure it's going to be in concert with what our state's attorney wants. You want to make sure it's in accordance with state accreditation and sometimes national accreditation standards, because we're liable when we issue a procedure that's going to be followed that someone can question or sue the town on. So one of the weaknesses in the department and one of the goals that I have not yet been able to achieve as your chief since I got sworn in was a complete revamping of all of our rules and regulations. Tenured commissioners in the room will know that I've been talking about this for 6 years. And while we're making little chips here and there because we have to, some of our practices in the field, which were in concert with what we should be doing, are not matched up with our written word because we haven't had the time to fix the written word. And that's a problem for a law enforcement agency. So there are many agencies around the state that hire professional associations to come in and do just that. That would blow away any of the line items that we're talking about here.
Okay, then, with all due respect then, and I'm saying this with all due respect then, how many of the officers are in here are on the clock?
None. I don't think we have anyone on the clock today.
None?
How
How about last week, 2 weeks ago?
I don't know who was here last week. I wasn't here. The lieutenant was assigned to come last week.
So,
But Breck, with all due respect, If I want my command staff to come to a meeting, they'll be here on my order, and I'll compensate them in accordance with their contract.
I'm also a salary employee and I don't get paid to be here. I'm salary.
So he's not.
And so is Jennifer, she's salary. She's not getting paid extra to be here, and I'm pretty positive Chairman Finch is not earning a dime.
I'm not earning it.
Exactly.
I'm paid hourly, and I'm here on my phone free will.
So we can go around the room. Sergeant Walsh is here.
No.
Master Sergeant Van Horst, Patrolman Mulvihill, and Sergeant DePerry are all here, and they're not being compensated.
Great.
But I applaud them for being here because they're taking an interest in the process and an interest in their career. Because when the town of Old Saybrook hires a new law enforcement professional and we invest a lot of money, I like to see the investment back.
Okay.
I have a question. Vehicle 4 mileage is substantially higher than the rest of them.
I'm sorry, can you say that again, Brad? I forgot Lieutenant McDonald. He reminded me he is also not getting paid, but he's here. So I didn't hear what you were saying, but I heard him say, "I am not getting paid." No, you're not. Sergeant DeMarco, I'm sorry, also not getting paid. So
Vehicle number 4, the mileage is substantially higher than the rest of them. Is there a reason for that?
there is. So vehicle number 4. First of all, you notice it's a 2013, which means we probably acquired it in 2012, is my guess. Looking back at Master Sergeant Van Horst. What we used to do, and maybe these two gentlemen here can remember, there used to be a dedicated sergeant's car or a sergeant vehicle. Back in their day, it was the only one that had a
You
shotgun.
didn't have any dedicated cars.
But you only had like 1 or 2 cars, yeah, okay. So car 4 used to be the sergeant's car. When we entered into the lease purchase agreement, what I chose to do is there is no supervisor car because all the cars are equipped the same. So instead of having one car on the road all the time, every shift, because there's always a sergeant working, a sergeant can drive any car in the fleet. And I encourage him to do so because then a supervisor gets in a car and can say to his subordinate, "You can take your coffee cup out," or "This isn't clean," or "The computer screen's cracked." And that's helped with vehicle maintenance.
So you would be rotating these around to try to keep the mileage pretty even where you can do it?
We do, yes. Yes, we do our best we
Car with
can.
88,000 miles with the engine hours on it, I hate to admit this, but it's got like 300,000 miles on it. When you're looking at engine power.
You're singing my song, correct.
So-
But that was not part of the
So I
lease
just want to make sure you're
purchase.
taking care of them and, you know, refurbishing I want to say refrigerator, but I don't want to say that. The radiator and coolant and all that, because that's what will protect these cars.
So we follow the maintenance plan that Ford prescribes for the vehicles based on mileage and engine hours.
Engine hours is important though, because, like I said, that car's got like close to 300,000 miles.
Correct. And just remember, that car was not part of our purchase. That was one of the cars that
Right.
we owned and we kept, and so that, I don't want anyone here to think that's part of that 2-year thing that we just talked about, and it's got 88,000 miles on it. That's not the case.
Next time you give us, I appreciate this list, next time you give it to us, if you could put in the initial date of service on there too, it'd be nice.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll have that exactly. You know, we can tell you that the lease purchase cars, so all the 2014 cars, if you remember when I reported back to the Board of Finance, their implementation of the fleet was staggered because they all had to be equipped, and we saved a considerable amount of money ordering all the equipment ourselves and putting it together ourselves, rather than what some communities do. They order a fully equipped car, and it costs so much more.
And then actually, if you don't have that information, you could just put in the date on the door. That would at least give us an idea.
As opposed to just the vehicle year?
No, I want the year there too, but also, like, say car 7 might have been made August of 12. So, you know, we get a better idea to know where these cars fall into line.
We can do that. I don't know if that, I mean,
Well,
if-
it helps understand, in other words, when you're looking at a 14, did you get it in August or did you get it the following July? That's all.
oh, sure.
Probably on the first oil change, the Ford Motor Company would have a track of when the first oil change went in. So it could be a relative first purchase or first use of the vehicle.
They do that 5,000 miles, so it would be 5,000 miles in.
Commissioner Finch, There's been some public comment about $8 for an accident report or $8 for any kind of report that comes out of the police department. With this administrative staff change, do you know if that'll change, whether that $8 will be increased or decreased or eliminated?
I couldn't tell you that at the moment.
Okay.
We've not recently looked at, there's several of those types of functions that, and fees that have been brought up recently. One of them is Park and Rec, fines for illegal parking down at the beaches, but to be quite honest with you, about a month or 6 weeks before moving into a new facility, those things are really on the back burner at the moment.
Okay.
We're trying to get a building up and running and functioning, and so those are things that are couldn't be looked at in the future, but I certainly would not want to give you exact time frame because our primary purpose is to get across the street ready.
So just to give you a little history on that, when you go to another police department to have a record search done, so record search is different from an FOI per page copying cost, which is statutorily dictated, as you know. So many towns subscribe to a service where you get in an accident, you want a copy of your accident report, you go online, you pay a third-party vendor $16, the town gets a percentage of that, and the customer gets the report if it's releasable. Instead of subscribing to a service, which means a third party has access to some of our reports, and we then have more of an IT burden to dictate which reports spill into a different third-party database that they can then release when a consumer does an online query, I decided to cut all the normal charges in half, came to $8, and we would retain those costs. Now, when I say we would retain that, I mean the town of Old Saybrook. So, for example, in 2013, we managed in our records department 870 records requests. Out of those 870, 806 were report requests, and 64 were background checks. From time to time, people come in and say, I need a background check. I'm either applying to be, to adopt a child, or I'm applying to a job, and they're requiring me to go to my local police department and get a background check. Out of all of that, the town of Old Saybrook got deposited into their general fund $5,531. That's what we're talking about. In 2014, we had 819 requests. 739 of them were records requests. 80 were background checks. And the total amount deposited into the town's general fund was $5,396. So what does that do? Well, you ask about revenues. This is a revenue stream. This does not come back into the police department budget. This is not an exchange account or a fund or anything. This goes into the general fund. If we choose not to charge $8 for a search anymore, it's fine with me. But then the town is not compensated for some of the work that that employee is doing. If the police commission says get rid of the $8 fee, that's fine. The town loses about $5,500 in the general fund. That's a decision that can be made. But adding efficiencies, we tried to see where we could increase revenue. $5,500 is not a lot, but it's more than, I don't know, 30% of some of my line items in my budget. You let me know what you want to do.
Well, there's two more.
It's also kind of a balancing act to cover your costs without charging more than you should, which then basically is a hidden tax to anyone that, particularly the residents of Old Saybrook, if they're the ones that are requesting it. That's the way I feel about it, is that, yes, you're gonna have to pay for some of this information, but I don't wanna see it go to $25 and be a burden to, another hidden burden to the people in the town that are already supporting the budget.
On the topic of the revenues, I know we've talked about this before, when we have contract workers coming in and what we charge for the flagmen. standardizing that. It's my understanding that we're the only town that doesn't do that.
That's not correct, ma'am, with all due respect. That is not correct.
I'm telling you, this is my understanding. But why we don't go for a flat fee of, $75, $100. We have car fees that we're paying, for idle time. It makes it easier for contractors to come in and budget their expenses. We have, before you said that, there's no way I could do it because I don't have an assistant to help me with that.
That's not what was said.
This is an efficiency.
So, let me quickly comment to that.
Well, can I just make one
Sure,
comment?
of course.
I feel the same way about that as I do about the $8. What's that magic number that, a lot of the contracts that get done in town are either local contractors or utilities. So we're all gonna pay for that sooner or later in one manner or another.
Well, not necessarily all local.
Not all local, no, but many of them are local, and probably the majority of them are utilities, which we all then, sooner or later, that gets filtered into your electric bill, or gas bill, or whatever.
But we're
So
paying for it on the back end, the use of cars
and
whatever
that
else. So
fee, the fee includes a fee for the car per hour.
It's not enough money.
It includes the rate of the officer and an administrative overhead fee. Now, you can sit here and argue all night what you feel it should be, what you feel it shouldn't be, but, and then if this board wants us to jack it up, then make a motion, vote it to us, and I'll bring it up at the next police commission.
So, let me just make just a couple quick comments. So, some towns that bill a set rate have a contractual agreement with their police officers that for outside work, they all make the same rate. So for example, Town A has patrolmen and sergeants, and they all have their own individual overtime rate if they're working for the town. But when they work for a private contractor, everybody makes $75 an hour. The senior guy likes it because he gets a little bump in his normal rate. The junior guy loves it because he gets a huge bump in his rate. And it's very easy to tell a contractor it's going to cost X dollars an hour. In our contract in Old Saybrook, that is not the case. There is no standardized outside employment or outside job hourly wage. Until that happens, it'll make it difficult. Secondly, as a municipality, I do not believe, my strong philosophy is we are not a for-profit business. So some of the contractors that we do work for have businesses in Old Saybrook and some do not. I don't believe in charging them more than what it's truly costing us. So let me give you an example. In the fiscal year, and I have printouts that I can give to you folks. In the 13-14 fiscal year, we billed, and we never said we couldn't do this because I have a clerk that works 6 hours a week just doing this. We billed vendors $460,995.15. Out of that money, make sure I have the 13, 14, we collected a little bit over $21,580 in administrative fees, and we collected $30,000 in vehicle fees. Where's all that go? That's an off-budget account that's maintained by the town treasurer. You own a construction company, you hire us to work on Tuesday for you. On Friday, that police officer is entitled to his pay. I take it from this off-budget account. You get an invoice, you get 30 days to pay. You eventually pay. So this line item fluctuates. Each week, I get presented a list of vendors that owe us money. Sometimes we have to call. Sometimes we have to issue stop work orders because they're in arrears of payment, which normally gets corrected very quickly. Over the course of time, this account once grew a lot, and I thought, wow, maybe we'll buy a couple of cars out of this account because we've saved up the money. Lo and behold, a big town project comes. The federal grant that we got to build the sidewalks on Route 1 near Staples. Absent in the federal grant is any police services whatsoever to direct traffic while they had Route 1 closed and they were blasting rock. The first selectman at that time, not the current administration, took all that funding out of this account. So there was no cost to the town taxpayer, but yet the money that we had set aside for vehicle use that could have been used for a car was depleted on a town project. That's happened a couple times. So the account's maintained by the treasurer. We do invoicing in and out. It's QuickBooks. This isn't difficult.
That's not really the question.
What is the question?
The question is, why aren't we just standardized fee, $100?
So I thought I answered that, because if one officer makes X amount, another officer makes X amount, our delta differs depending on who
We keep
gets
the
the
delta.
job. What's that?
We keep the delta. The town keeps the delta.
Right, but it's a different delta each time. So I'm not billing a true cost.
My answer to your question was, make a motion, vote on it, send it to the police commission.
I think you're price gouging a contractor. And I think eventually it comes back to us as a consumer. So if I'm overcharging Frontier or CLMP or whatever, eventually that's gonna come back to our bill. So we're billing them actual costs, plus an administrative fee, plus a vehicle fee. I don't think we're in the for-profit business. If my superiors say charge more money, we'll charge more money. I don't think it's fair.
The one thing, Chief, though, is, I don't know if you changed it, you were charging $8 an hour for the car. And I believe you maybe went up to 12?
I think we went up in the 14 year, let me see if we did or not. Still $8.
Yeah, so at 32 miles per hour, at the government rate of 55 cents, you're not charging enough money.
Well, don't forget, we're not traveling a lot of miles. So the cars on construction jobs aren't traveling.
Yeah, but you're wearing them out. When you're looking at 32 miles per hour, sitting still, when I'm looking at these sheets on these vehicles, you've got a lot of hours on these.